Bwrdd Iechyd Prifysgol Bai Abertawe. Ar ran y bwrdd, croeso cynnes i'r cyfarfod y bwrdd, yw corff llywodraethu'r sefydliad. Good morning, colleagues and everyone, and a warm welcome on behalf of the board to today's board meeting. I'm Jan Williams, the chair, and the board, of course, is the governing body of the organisation with a number of specific roles and responsibilities. It's a strategic population health body, and it has a statutory duty around health protection and public health for the Swansea Bay population. And on today's agenda, we are including a briefing that is very much around health protection and public health. It's a briefing on Mpox, which is a viral disease that the World Health Organization has declared as an international health emergency. Very low level risk in the UK, so it's not a matter of concern, but we do have to make a number of preparations. And today we're going to hear about those preparations, and it will indicate the breadth of the role of the health board, because we need to prepare across these viral possibilities. And Jennifer and Juna will take us through that. And then we will start to bring in, at every board meeting, a number of the key health protection and public health issues we face. As you know, the board has to focus on the future and to set strategic direction, and we have to keep population health and the reduction of health inequalities firmly at the forefront of our minds. And today we're taking a presentation on the health board role as an anchor institution in the foundational economy of South West Wales. And this, for the board, is a precursor to more detailed discussions we'll be having with our colleagues on the board of Hywel Dda when we meet them on the 17th of October to start looking at the concept of a regional health economy. The board has to build and sustain strategic partnerships, and the report from our Population Health and Partnership Committee today makes reference to a number of partnerships. And effective governance around partnership working is vital. And from the November board onwards, we will be taking a programme of reviews of our partnership governance, and we're going to start with the area planning board. So look out for that in November. So the board has to have a clear line of sight to the front line of service delivery. And today we're going to hear a patient story relating to the decision we took on the 10th of September to reopen the freestanding maternity unit at East Port Talbot, and then subsequently home birth services. And as well as looking to the future, the board has to scrutinise and oversee delivery against in-year plans. And this section of the board agenda is always weighty because of a range of finance and performance matters. And we also rely heavily on the work of our board committees, and we include reports from several committees under this section because the committees do the heavy lifting on behalf of the board. We're halfway through the year, the financial year, and today we have a really important item on our agenda, the financial and performance projections for the remainder of 2024-25, taking into account where we are at the end of month 5. We spend £1.6 billion of public money, and there must be clear and effective governance arrangements in place to make sure that we discharge our stewardship role properly. There is always a heavy item on the agenda around governance, and today we are taking two important updates on maternity and neonatal services under that heading. And they're both in the governance section as they're being managed outside normal management arrangements. One through a goal command structure and one through an independent review mechanism. The board also has to comply with all the relevant legislation, and we've got two important pieces of legislation we're considering today: the 3-year review under the Nurse Staffing Levels Act for Wales, and then our compliance against the Welsh Language Act. The board, of course, with its staff, has to set the tone and culture for the organisation. And at every meeting, the board will be reiterating the fact that we want all staff to come to work to be their best authentic selves without fear of disadvantage or discrimination of any kind. And a key message from the board: anyone who's subject to this type of behaviour, who sees it or hears it, please call it out, because there are processes in place to raise concern. And by creating a safe environment for staff to speak up, we'll help staff ensure that they can be confident in their roles, they can thrive and develop, and in that way, they can provide the best possible care for patients and serve our wider population best. So that's the role and responsibilities of the board. Our agenda today will cover all of that agenda. So I'm going to start by setting out the apologies that we've had from Tom Crick, Keith Lloyd, Judith Vincent, Clarissa Vaughan, and Andrew. So we'll record those, please. Are there any declarations of interest from board members on this agenda outside those declarations already made on our register, please? Thank you very much. So we'll move then into the final section of our preliminary matters, although we always cover some really weighty points. And Richard, I'll ask you to take us through your Chief Executive's report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Everybody. The Chief Executive report is there for you. I will go through it briefly and touch on some areas that aren't covered elsewhere on the agenda. The board will be aware that new Chief Executive has been appointed. Abby Harris will join us on the 28th of October. Abby is currently the Interim Chief Commissioner of the NHS Wales Joint Commissioning Committee, and she'll be joining us with a wealth of NHS, Welsh Government and local governance experience. For my part, it's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure to lead Swansea Bay as the Interim Chief Executive for the past year, and I'll continue in that role until Abby arrives, at which point I will return to my substantive post as Executive Medical Director and Deputy Chief Executive. I know Abby well, and I'm really looking forward to working with her and with Jan in taking the organisation forward. Also wanted to say at the outset how grateful I am, and I'm sure the board is, for our staff's continued efforts. The summer months we all sometimes think are going to be less pressurised than the winter, but the reality is we see very little seasonal variation these days, and we're very acutely aware of the pressures and demands across our services. And there's lots of strain at the minute, which is being felt in Swansea Bay as it is elsewhere. In terms of performance, there's a substantive item on the agenda regarding performance of targeted intervention. We'll pick that up. And as Jan has referenced, we're very acutely aware of the financial position of the Health Board, and a substantive item on the agenda later about the financial position currently and for the forecast for the remainder of the year. In terms of other items in the Chief Exec's report, just to pick out for you, maternity and neonatal, as Jan has alluded to, both the patient story later about the reopening of the Neath Talbot Birth Centre, and on the progress regarding the oversight of our maternity services. And just to add in there, I'm sure board members will have noted that on September the 2nd, the Princess of Wales Hospital in Bridgend closed for a period of 12 weeks to undertake some essential safety works in their maternity unit. And as a result, both Swansea Bay and Cardiff and Vale Health Board are assisting during that period. From the modelling exercises that have been undertaken, it's anticipated that around 11 to 20 women per month would choose to have their birth in Swansea rather than in Cwm Taf. And during that period of preparation, plans have been put in place to make sure that staff from the Princess of Wales Hospital temporarily move their place of work to either Swansea or Cardiff to support the workforce in those units. In terms of communication, as part of our efforts to strengthen our internal comms, I hosted the second of our series of Ask Richard sessions for staff. That's an open Q&A. We were encouraged by the first, but maybe even more so by the second. That was attended by about 120 staff from across the organisation. Some good questions from staff, very open in that meeting in answering those, and we'll have another of those events in the next month or so. September's our staff recognition month, and it's a time where we recognise how staff are at the heart of everything that we do. We're shining a spotlight on amazing colleagues who go above and beyond and deliver the best possible care for our patients. An example of this, the first person we featured was Chris Morell, who's Chris, our Director of Therapies and Health Sciences, whose career now has spanned 50 years in the NHS, and wanted to take this opportunity to recognise Chris and her efforts and the huge contribution she's made in a variety of different roles, Chris, over those years. You're an inspiration to our staff and a real role model, so thank you very much indeed. Important to follow up from what Jan was saying about staff feeling safe in work. October next month is our Speak Up month, which provides several opportunities. Firstly, to promote what we're doing to deliver our commitment, to empower and encourage collective responsibility and accountability for raising and addressing concerns, and to highlight the importance of feedback and action. We very much appreciate that, and it's really important in terms of the culture of our organisation and staff speak up. Related to that and our need to recognise staff, we had planned our annual award ceremony, the One Big Way Staff Awards, on the 19th September. We plan to go ahead with that, but considering the really difficult messages that we're sending across the organisation about the financial position and the need to make every effort that we can to save every penny, we made the very difficult decision to cancel that event. But we will still deliver the awards. Board members are filming sections for inclusion in a what will be an online event or a filmed event rather than a live in-person event, and they'll be presented with their trophy and their achievements publicised. And then finally, just on the back page of the Chief Executive's report, some news about the really important work of the Health Board charity, Jiffy's Bike Ride, the Coach Close Club campaign, and Going the Extra Mile.
So can I thank Richard for the report and ask any comments or questions? Nicola, I think you wanted to ask about the health centre.
I did, yes. I can see obviously from the 1st of August it was no longer being managed by us. Just wondering how we are monitoring and how things are going with the service.
Happy to step in there to answer that question. So there's a number of different ways. So firstly, there's a normal contract monitoring arrangements that are in place. There's also additional meetings in place with the practice as well to monitor how things are going. Additional funding for staff and other costs to support the practice were put in place, so that's being monitored on an ongoing basis. The practice is establishing a patient participation group, so I think that's another positive thing. There's going to be a further public meeting that David Rees MS is convening, and that's always been a helpful means of getting feedback there, and we do continuously get that feedback at the meetings and informally outside that as well. We're continuing our engagement with LICE around this in terms of feedback that they pick up, and then my department and primary care are meeting on a regular basis and catching up on all the intelligence that's being obtained. So it's quite a comprehensive sort of package of ways of doing that. Can I just on the back of the Chief Executive report as well just mention that on the staff recognition, the announcements we made this afternoon in terms of the winners of all the different categories. So just to flag that this went out on the intranet, so I want to just flag that.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's nice positive news as well. So Nicola, you should not. I think Andrew, you and I are visiting, aren't we? We're visiting before too long, Nicola. So if we give you the date of that and you want to come with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Pat, please come in.
Oh, yeah, and another point, it was really good to see the multi-agency discharge event in your report, and it's going to be repeated in October. But just a question really came out of PFC, just a concern about still the level of clinically optimised in Morriston and high acuity wards, obviously contributing to the flow issues through that. And I was just wondering if there's any plans, obviously back into the community is where ultimately you want to go, but is there any plans in place for step down, possibly into wards elsewhere, not in Morriston?
I'll bring Deb in a sec. At the national level, it's recognised that the level of concern about the overall number of clinically optimised patients. And there's a meeting being convened by Welsh Government, which will have one of the chief executives representing on that alongside local authorities, which I think is meeting shortly, just to consider what additional measures could be put in place across the system from what's been done elsewhere. Deb, in terms of what we're doing specifically in Swansea, each look at that.
Yes, certainly, Richard. So we are making small inroads. So we are starting to see the levels reduce. They call clinical patients. They're patients who shouldn't be in our acute hospital beds and need to be somewhere else, and that could be community beds, out into home or in the care environment. Where we are at the moment is we opened a significant amount of surge capacity over the winter period to try and manage flow in a better way. And due to the levels that we're still seeing, we've been unable to close those. So most of the beds that we would use for that purpose on a temporary basis are still full. So as an example, we opened the plan when we merged the medical take into Morriston was to take all of the acute general medical beds out of Singleton Hospital. And we managed to do that at the end of last year. And we opened them up as surge during winter. At the moment, those beds are still open. So we still have 16 patients in Singleton Hospital. They're predominantly used for clinically optimized patients. So whilst we're working through that, the continued pressure, August has been a really poor month for urgent emergency care across NHS Wales, and we're still seeing that. What we're trying to do to counteract that is obviously have a reset plan of where we go now, particularly as we're going into winter 24-25. We've got a summit next week, and we'll be bringing all colleagues together to look at what we could do further to manage the flow better. Predominantly, you're correct, Pat, these patients don't need to be in hospital. So whilst we keep plugging that gap, that stops us putting in the right actions to get the patients in the right place. That is being picked up nationally, as Richard said. We're joining the Care Action Committee and now starting a round of visits next week. The Cabinet Secretary has taken an interest in this. It's working between us and local authorities and Welsh Government now to look at the levers of how we get the right care in place. I think that will need to be more of a joint effort. So it's not just local authorities and it's not just health. It's how do we work collaboratively to put that capacity in the right place. We are still plugging a lot of those gaps, which is obviously costly for us in terms of staffing, resource and financial as well. So we need to do it better. We need to do it in the right way, which is move the patients into the right place in the first place.
Jean, then Rena.
Excellent report, Richard. I wanted to talk about the hospital electronic prescribing and medicines administration implementation that we've just completed in the learning disability sites. I just wondered, and I look at Matt as well at the same time, are we using it to inform what we spend, how we spend, etc.? So are we using the data collection from this particular system to be able to help us with the financial planning, etc.? But more importantly, are there any plans to utilise artificial intelligence to manage that prescribing process more adroitly in the future?
Sure. Yeah, in terms of what we're able to measure through HAPMA, how we pull that into what we do in terms of medicines costing and use.
Yeah, absolutely. So so there's two elements really to pharmacy when it comes to the digital systems. There's the electronic prescribing, as you've just described.
Yeah.
But there's also the pharmacy stock system as well. Now that's the system really that manages the stock levels and the cost of drugs, etc. But of course now we can link the drugs that are actually being prescribed and being used with that information to absolutely look at our financial model. I don't think we've done enough in that space yet. We've just finished the rollout, as you've said, but we've certainly now got a wealth of information that we can now do more of that analysis of. In terms of the future, yes, absolutely. You know, we've talked previously, haven't we, about how we need to maximise the benefits of AI moving forward. We're right at the start of that journey. Welsh Government are trying to take a bit of a lead on that with what they've commissioned there. But Raj and I have had a number of conversations so far how we can start getting, I guess, more control and a plan with what we do in the organisation. There's lots of emerging pockets of good practice going on or areas that are trying small projects to see, what benefits there could be. For example, in orthopedics, we've been looking at an AI project to help us manage the complex patients list to determine which patients should go to Morriston, which can be safely operated in other hospitals. And having that AI intelligence behind the scenes gets us, to that 95% plus accuracy in determining where those patients should go. Whereas the manual process previously, we were seeing too many, I guess, simpler patients in the Morriston site where they didn't need to be. So that's one good example of something that's already happening, but we need to now expand that and in drugs as well, as you say.
Integration of the system. Yeah, thank you.
Are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Richard?
Just back to that, Jane, it's a really good question. I think the bit that we also need to link up is the electronic prescribing system is able to guide our clinicians towards the correct drug to prescribe. Conscious as well that there will be what we might regard as good prescribing. So we're prescribing according to guidelines, so we're clear on which drug is our preferred choice. And then it's how we then use the information in the electronic prescribing system to let us know where there might be areas where we could improve the prescribing that's going on by clinicians to support them to do that. So I think that's another aspect of it we need to bring in.
Thank you.
Is this on the same point, Dan,
Yes.
before Rini comes in?
And I'll be brief, just to reassure colleagues as well, part of the planning process we've laid out Narissa for next year, commissions individual component parts to give evidence base for the planning assumptions, some are beds, some theatres. We've also asked for a model around medicines and prescribing as well to help us financially forecast using some of this emerging data. This is a good starting point. It takes a while to get there, but just to reassure you, we'll be using the available data in the planning process.
And Jean, of course, that'll be of interest for the new committee when it comes in. Thank you. Rena, please come in.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear yesterday that obviously in performance and finance that the reconfiguration of the emergency department is on the cards and that we potentially have a bid in for funding from the Welsh Government for this. What I'm particularly seeking assurance is that in doing the reconfiguration, as well as obviously trying to assist staff with better flow in the department, I'm quite concerned about the provisions for people who are waiting and whether we have the necessary comfortable environment for people to wait. And in particular, Jennifer, the food options that are available in the emergency department, which at the moment are very limited in terms of healthy options. So I've mentioned this a number of times, but I really do think it's a good opportunity for us to consider this again now, because we are having the opportunity of extra money coming in.
I don't have a specific answer on that, but certainly something that we need to look at. I guess that's balanced on the other side by if we had great flow in the department, we'd have people waiting for a shorter period of time and we would need to provide food. I think there's, it's availability, then have something to drink and how we do that. But we can certainly consider that. Deb, is there anything you wanted to add to that? I know we've had some conversations about
Yeah, and it's a bit of a mix, isn't it? So it's the patients waiting in the department to be admitted. They are our patients, they are our responsibility to feed. I think they have the same choices as ward-based patients. I'll just check on that, Rena, and give you that assurance. I think then for the patients in the waiting area who are waiting to be seen, who are not in our system as such, and no decisions been made on those, it's what provision do we put in there? So there are vending machines there. I noticed from one of the spot checks last week, only one of them is in use. There are better vending machines you can get with more healthy options on there. So I think I'll explore that with Joe and Rob Daniel and the team in Morris, and just to explore, are the vending machines there and are they working and functional so people have access to food and drink if they are waiting for long periods of time. Obviously, we want to reduce the wait. That's the main area for us to address. But then to have a look at actually what options are available for vending machine provision. I know other hospitals, they have like toasty machines that you've got as a vending thing, so you can get different choices. So we'll pick it up and have a look at it. I think the conversation we had yesterday, Rena, was around particularly the front end of Marston Hospital, where we've got Coston and Subway, and our own facilities at the back end of the hospital, which is a long way away. So it's how do we get that balance of making sure visitors and patients are aware of where our canteen is so that they can access that and have a healthier option, and that conversation with our providers at the front door of what they offer as well. And I can pick that up with that. Thank you.
And Jennifer, I know the question of nutritional content of NHS food and healthy eating options is a perennial, but can you possibly provide a briefing to the board on what the state of play is in terms of nutritional content we have to offer, etc., from a public health perspective? Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other points for?
Yeah.
Steve?
Richard, in your report, you referred to difficult decisions.
Yes.
And we've been saying this for some time, and given the financial constraints, at a certain point, we're going to have to say what those difficult decisions are and what the implications are. So what's the plan to disseminate that information?
I think some of that, the conversation we'll have today will outline in a bit more detail about what the actual issues are that we're looking at. Now, clearly in delivering the financial plan, there are always mitigations that may need to be in place. If some schemes don't deliver, we might need to consider others. So while we can make those decisions right now, I think that's going to be an active conversation about what choices we have. I mean, inevitably up front, the thing that people will see in the organisation already is the vacancy control. So whereas previously a post was empty or vacant, somebody left or moved on, we would fill it. There will be posts currently, particularly in the admin and management posts, where we're not doing that. We're making decisions to hold posts which requires other members of staff to look flexibly about what they're doing, how they're doing it, what they deliver, what their workload is. Wherever we can, we review those in terms of quality and equality impact assessments to make sure that we're not making decisions that would impact adversely particular outcomes. But in terms of the choices that are made, may impact on experience, for example, outside areas of quality and outcomes. So maybe we'll pick up some of those in the substantive item on the.
I think the financial plan is relatively inaccessible to the general public.
Yes.
It will be good to summarise broadly what the impacts are.
So thank you again, Richard, for a very comprehensive report as ever. And we do note that this would be your last meeting of the board as interim chief executive. We're very happily staying in us and staying with us, reverting to your substantive role. But we would like to place on record our thanks for stepping into the interim chief executive role. Very challenging times, and thank you ever so much for everything you've done in the last year. We appreciate it and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we move on to part 2 and setting strategic direction, and I've referenced the Population Health and Partnerships Committee already. But Steve, would you like to bring to the board's attention any key matters on the committee, please?
I will do it, Gail. And so the report's in front of you. This report refers back to 2 meetings. The minute taker for the first meeting was indisposed for a while, so it took some time to get the minutes and the report together. Hence, two meetings are covered in one report. I guess the first thing to say is that when the committee met the last time in earlier this month, we had a good look at our terms of reference and ourselves and what the role was, especially in the area of prevention that the chair referred to earlier. We decided to take some time out next month to reflect on the terms of reference and to perhaps make them more fit for purpose. So that will be the first thing that happens. Secondly, I would refer to the Arch Regional Collaboration Organisation. The chair referred to the regional work we're doing, and especially the association with Halcar. This is part of that association, and so we received a report on its activities. The Children and Young People Services, we noted that obviously we do a lot of work with children and young people. This tends to be spread all across the health board, and there's currently no single focus for that. But that is being changed, and a strategy is being developed so that there will be a single point of focus for the whole children and young people's agenda. We then talked about substance misuse, and the chair also referred earlier to the Area Planning Board, which is the body responsible for substance misuse services in our region. We heard that it had launched an independent commission to look at the root causes of high misuse rates in the region. And while the commission has yet to report, we've had some initial feedback that there is concern about the speed of access to services. And so we, along with our statutory partners in the APB, which are the local authorities, our 2 local authorities, and the police and others, we will be working together to improve this as a matter of urgency. And the board will hear, as Jan said, more about this at the November meeting. So I think that's all I want to bring out of the reports. Happy to take or refer any questions.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee want to add anything to Steve's report? In terms of reference reviewing will be important, because this committee, the work of this committee will feed into population health item of the full board. So we'll be looking for that programme of work in 25. So thank you for doing that. So coming back to then the foundational health economy and our role as an anchor institution. And Jennifer, I hand over to you. Could you take about 10 minutes for the actual presentation, and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you.
We can. You'll see, hope I can see it myself, so I know that you can see it. You can now see the presentation. So I've just got a few slides that I'll be able to circulate just to bring this through, and actually it ties in really well with the report that we've just heard, because some of the other elements that you'll have seen in there related to Anchor Institution and also Tata Steel, and so this actually relates specifically in regard to those. Foundational economy, I suppose, you know, setting the scene on that. There's the Foundational Economy in Health and Social Care Services programme, which has already sort of set out back in 2021-22 its purpose in terms of maximising the impact in Wales of health and social care as a sector within Anchor in its entirety. And what it can actually achieve. And the focus of the programme is around those three elements. So one is around the procurement, you know, and as where we've got large sums of money vested in every aspect of what we do. And the way that we spend that money can make a difference to the communities. And it's how we spend that money is what drives foundational economy. We've also got the people elements and how we recruit and how do we bring people in who, you know, local people, local jobs for local people, but also people who may have been some distance away from the employment sector, and how do we bring them back into employment who are further from the labour market. And again, you know, we're an employer of 14,000 people, so we've got opportunities there, and there are things that we're already doing. And place as well, so really thinking about our infrastructure and how that plays its role. And our population health strategy, so this isn't a new agenda, and we've already recognised it in our population health strategy, and it's encamped within that broader Anchor Institution piece. And you'll see in there that as part of our commitment, we've recognised the need to adopt and apply foundational economy principles as part of the decision making. So hopefully that helps to explain the connection between foundational economy when we talk about that and Anchor Institution. So an Anchor Institution, in its very simplest sense, is an organisation that's not going to go anywhere. So it's not just health and social care, but it will be local authorities, it will be the police, and it will be various other not just public sector organisations, but much of it does talk to the public sector. And so they're rooted in and connected to local communities. And according to the Health Anchors Learning Network, of which there is one that's already established in England, which we've been learning from and understanding a lot more about how they've approached it, because we know there's always room for learning from elsewhere. And there is now an intention to establish a Wales version of this, because there is interest across health and social care across Wales. But it actually articulates there the 6 dimensions that often fall underneath the heading of an Anchor Institution. And Welsh Government will often, and that's what you see in the infographic there. So it talks about our workforce employment and skills, it talks about procurement and spend, it talks about estates and infrastructure, which are the elements we've already talked about. But it also includes elements around reducing environmental impacts. So that's our decarbonisation and net zero type agenda, working with local anchor partners. So really thinking about ourselves as part of an anchor system. Now that can be with other health and social care anchor organisations, but it can also, on our footprint, be about working through PSBs and through CJCs and other partnerships that we have, where we have other public sector bodies who are already progressing some of this agenda. So we've got opportunities there to really think about procurement in the round across all of those. And our community engagement and civic actions, it's really bringing people with us really on that. And Welsh Government helpfully, I think, simplify this because they describe the foundational economy as the money that is spent by anchor institutions. So it just again reinforces what we can achieve as anchors, and we can really move that forward. And I would argue, as
as a very large employer, as a very large anchor organisation, we can really be a catalyst for quite a lot of this, although there is already work going on. So this is just, sort of revisiting the fact that as a health board, we have already made a commitment, and we've recognised this as part of our 4-pillar model that we've articulated in our population health strategy. And that is because we know that by really thinking about our pillar 2, 3 and 4, as we would call them, as an employer, as an anchor institution, and as in productive partnerships, we can really shift the dial on the building blocks of life that really affect people's health outcomes. We know that improving the quality and access to healthcare services is important, but it will only narrow the gap by approximately 10%. So we've already understood that, we've already made our commitment to that. And there is therefore quite a lot we're already going after in terms of opportunities. I've mentioned foundational economy. Circular economy is another agenda that is already in play nationally. So these are often how they're articulated nationally. So you have the sustainable healthcare, you've got social value. So all of these are in play. And so there's quite a lot of terminology that we could get quite caught up in. But I think the important thing is to recognise the synergy, because often the agendas complement each other. So it's really about being able to use the anchor as a way of synergizing and harmonizing all of these different agendas to build that value ring. So where are we on the journey? As I said, we've already got it as a commitment within our population health strategy. We're already active in quite a lot of these agendas. We're seen as leaders in our decarbonisation agenda locally, and that is recognised. We spearheaded alongside Hywel Dda the very first decarbonisation and sustainability awards, which is really good, and conference. We've got social value. So through our procurement processes, we're already applying some of those sort of social value principles to the contracts that we're letting. We've got work that we're doing through our people strategy, really thinking about how are we helping people through apprenticeships and other things. So I suppose it's just sort of recognising we're not starting from zero, we're already doing quite a lot, but it's about what more can we do. And we've made a lot of connections with different stakeholders and different partners. So, for example, Titanium are already doing quite a lot that are spearheading this. They've redeveloped some flats in the Sandfields area, and they took very much these principles. So they looked at how could they source local material, how could they use the contracting of different stages of the redevelopment to actually help with startups of local organisations, which are now able to trade with, draw in other contracts. So some really good examples where we can maximise that. And as the chair's mentioned, there's also an opportunity now for us to look at this on an even bigger footprint, which gives us a completely different playing field potentially for the impact that we can have across the region of looking at it as a regional health economy and within a World Health Organization sub-regional health network. So I think that's really exciting and something to look forward to. And, in terms of examples, so this is a bit small, but in circulating it, you'll be able to see that in a little bit more detail. But it talks to this is working with Public Health Wales, who've done an initial high-level review of what are the high-impact actions that can be done within the foundational economy. And I've mapped those to our 4-pillar model because it helps us then relate that to what does that mean from pillar 1 in terms of healthcare provision. Elements such as high vaccination rates. We may not even think that that would be important, but actually children not missing school matters. So it may feel a bit of a distance from maybe what we would envisage in terms of foundational economy, but I think these actions help us really see what our potential role and contribution is to this as an agenda. I've already talked to Borrelia about pillar 2 in terms of employment. Anchor institution, we've got that in terms of preferential procurement of local suppliers, moving away maybe from chain franchises in hospitals to local providers, a little bit of what we were just touching on just now about what are our opportunities to think about local food, local plate type agenda. And again, not forgetting that working through our partners is going to be important because there are things that we can create. If we look at something like the Preston model, where the anchors coming together meant that the buying power to create a sustainable local economy and a business environment that enables startups, enable people going from micro businesses to small medium enterprises, really helpful. These are the next steps. So it's about the board being asked to support a progression towards the development of the regional health foundational economy with all of our membership of the Emergent Foundational Economy NHS Leadership Network that's been set up to learn from others across Wales, commit resources through in-kind contribution to developing the Welsh version of the National Health Anchors Learning, and then to note the existing work.
Thank you, Jen. We've covered an awful lot of ground there in 10 minutes. And what we will do, we will include the presentation pack in the resource pack that comes out to the board before the 17th of October meeting. So just to make sure that everybody can reflect on that when we come together with all of that. Are there any immediate questions, comments? Nuria?
First thing that I would like to do is I really welcome this, as you know, Jennifer. So I want to thank you for the work that you've done, and also thank Sarah for the work that her department has done to actually ensure that we do our part in terms of the Anchor Institution agenda. I know that you've worked together very closely, and I've seen some of the findings. I think they're really good. I guess that the challenge for me is that that's only one element of our organisation, and I can see in the description, Jennifer, so many opportunities for us to take, particularly on that place element, more action in terms of our estates and our community engagement and how we use our estates as a community asset to build the economy. So I think that my bit for assurance is around ensuring that as an organisation, we look at everything we do through the lens of an anchor institution, because I think that we will find there's huge opportunities out there to do things differently. That would be my ask.
I've got Jean and Pat.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I congratulate them, Jennifer and the team, and Sarah and the team as well. One of the things I think is really important for us, because the foundational and circular economy papers that came out from Welsh Government about 10 years ago have had various iterations since. And one of the concerns was initially that whilst people were encouraged to, as we say, spend the Swansea pound within Swansea, there was a concern that any Pan Wales or national programme would become fragmented by adopting that local approach. So I think it's really important that we understand perhaps the concept and the drivers behind the foundation on the circular economy, and that will help us inform the practicality of translating that into a local, regional and national activity.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Really important point there. And there is that All Wales work underway again now through a different approach. Please come in.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. It's really interesting. I think there's a couple of elements to this. There's the role of all health boards as an anchor institution, and even without making any efforts at all, we will have a massive impact, regionally and nationally through our employment, our procurement. And I was kind of wondering, are there any national studies where people have tried to calculate that impact? Yes. There's then an enhanced role you can play. And I think that what you're describing here is all those enhancements we can make to really to take that forward and play, to play that extra role. And I think there's a good story there about the base, what the impact you have, and then of all the enhancements that you'll make to make sure that impact is more significant and more targeted. Yeah. So I just wonder if there was any way we could publicise and that initial impact of that.
Yeah. There are reports around that, so we will make those references available. So we will do that, and obviously we want to build on them. And Louise, you want to come in there?
Yes, please. I was looking at it particularly from an employment point of view, and partly to do with Tata Steel. But how do we engage employers in the Swansea Bay and region to sign up to this so that they're part of it as well, and they offer apprenticeships and employment and the healthy canteens and the health checks and so on, that is obviously going to be necessary, and we can't do entirely on our own. We need to have a greater involvement.
So I suppose there's a set of structures in and around Tata Steel in itself,
Yes.
and the implications and what's happening with that. And then there are a couple of other things. So one is about, we've started to do some of that convening of others around the foundational economy principles and anchor institutions to scope out where the opportunities lie. But this agenda also plays very much into the things like the public service boards. And then there'll be other partners, organisations, because there are so many different agendas sitting within this. There are a number of different partnerships that align with those different agendas. So, for example, if you're looking at the social value elements, then there are partnerships coming together to look specifically at those in terms of how you think about the contracting and procurement elements. So it's about breaking up the agenda that sits in its entirety and into the relevant touch points with other partners in order to drive that forward across a range of partners and across the region. And I think there's more work that we need to be doing about drawing in the business sector. We're doing some of that, but I think there's more of that we need to be doing, because we've tended to focus on being clearer on the public sector response within this in the first instance, but there is absolutely more being brought in. And the example that I gave around Titarian is a really good one in terms of bringing in the private sector and helping to develop that.
Yes, because that's really my focus is the energising the private sector to take its part in order to improve the economy in Swansea.
Yeah. There are two more questions on this now, comments, because we will need to move on, but we will be remitting the Population Health and Partnership Committee on this. Darren, then Richard, and then we'll conclude this
My
item.
final point of support, Chair. So in terms of procurement and states, we need to connect on that, because there's a huge opportunity there across the broader footprint. And also just to support the strategic sense of this work from a strategic financial perspective, because if we get this right, our resource consumption curve starts to reduce over time. We've got a 10-year ambition around the vision in 3 cycles broadly. And starting well and purposefully will have so many benefits across the piece, particularly around how we're then able to allocate our resources to get better and better at this, whilst making sure we maintain sustainability as well. So firmly endorse it, happy to work very closely with the team on that.
Thank you, Darren. Richard, final point to you.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, we're building on solid foundations thanks to the work that the Jen's been doing. In terms of raising the profile and awareness around population health and foundation economy, my team works on the basis of doing a number of campaigns throughout the year. They're working with Jen right now on planning what the campaign would be, I think is early in the new year, around population health and foundation economy. So we'll be able to raise the profile of this in a much sort of broader way, both internally, because that's really important, but also externally as well.
Well, we could have discussed this for a lot. And of course, it will form one of our key areas of discussion with our colleagues. And perhaps we could give some thought to priorities for joint working in 2026, because we'll be doing some work on that during the day on the 17th of October. So Steve will refer a number of matters to the committee, particularly that the board will support the asks that Jennifer's made of us. So that's very much taking that forward. And of course, it all connects very clearly into the population health strategy and how that will drive the 25-28 IMTP. And we'll provide the references in terms of what we already know around the value for money. The Finance Academy in Wales does some major work around particularly the procurement agenda on this. So we'll make sure those resources are available as well. So thank you very much for that. So we move then on to 2 items in respect of business case approvals. And of course, I mentioned the role that committees play, and our Performance and Finance Committee will have looked at these in some detail. So the board is not going to do that and duplicate the work of our committees. So Darren, over to you in respect of 2.3, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief given that introduction. I think the term alteration of 2 cases, which is the type of report, doesn't do this justice. This is a business case for significant clinical service development. So I'm delighted to bring this today. It's been developed passionately with clinicians. As you said, the case was supported by the management board and has been recommended for approval by the Performance and Finance Committee into the board today for ratification following due scrutiny. OR1 theatres are integrated laparoscopic theatres which support the delivery of high volume, low complexity procedures, and locating these in East Port Talbot hospitals, specifically strategically aligns that with the work the Health Board's done in terms of its clinical service plan and endorses and supports that. Importantly, work here will transfer from Morriston Hospital and will free up time on the recently commissioned robot, which I know the board members will be aware of, and is a significant step forward for us in terms of clinical modernisation. The case increases efficiency as surgical teams work in a very different way between two theatres, of which the theatres is optimal. And we've done that specifically because there is capital efficiency as well to doing the work at once. I think there's something like between a third more cost to do the extra theatre as it would have been to do two theatres separately. So taking capital efficiency and workforce efficiency through there. It's very important for us as a region, and we'll be able to work with our colleagues across Hywel to do this. But equally recently, we've been approached by Welsh Government to support activity for Betsy Cadwallader as well, for some of their complex cystectomy cases, which will be done on the robot at Morriston as we liberate that space through this case. So a flagship for us in terms of Welsh as well as local health economy. The capital cost is 4.285 million, has been robustly tested through the case, and Welsh Government's expecting the case and have engaged with us on that solution around Betsy Cadwallader. The case identifies a modest revenue requirement of 50,000, which we will address through that extra activity that we'll do, potentially cover off some future demand issues as well. And should this be supported, the team will be operational as early as 12 to 30 months from now, based on the current work programme. So I'm here today to ask the board to ratify the case. There's a comment about noting that I'd like the board actually to take assurance that any extra capacity we do wish to commission will be subject to robust business cases as well, rather than frequent developments. Thank you.
Was there anything you wanted to add from the committee's perspective?
So they came under robust scrutiny by the committee, and particularly in terms of patient benefits and costs, financial impacts, and we were happy to recommend.
So are we happy to approve on that basis? And we can take assurance that any additional costs will come back to us through additional business cases. And obviously, we welcome the opportunity to provide services for the population under our wider role. That's really good news. Thank you. To move on to the second report then, Darren, ET business case.
I've put my teeth in for this one. So this is a case for the positron emission tomography, commuted tomography PET-CT case.
Well done.
And as per the previous case, this has been through the same rigorous management board and performance events committee scrutiny. The case is strategically aligned with the NHS Wales Joint Commissioning Committee direction as set, and has been forms part of the overall ambition for cancer services through the JCC. And what the case does is replaces the current part-time annual-based PET-CT service located at Singleton Hospital, which is lifted in for 3 days a week and then removed, and is not co-located with existing cancer services, so they're suboptimally located as well. What the case will do is improve the quality of diagnostic care by alleviating cancer waiting times across South West Wales. And I urge colleagues to see this. It's a fantastic piece of technology, and it brings artificial intelligence generated high-resolution imagery into play as well. So give you a very forefront of digital and AI technology to support the health board and its patients. It will provide and can provide sufficient capacity to meet demand locally, at least until 2028, and we factor into that demand. That's the modelling of the case. And helpfully, the new facility which will be constructed will be co-located with the cancer centre. And we've clearly, through the process, identified a location which works and is supported again by the clinical team for clinical team working. Patient experience will be significantly enhanced as well as the clinical outcomes through the implementation of this technology. It's a £13.9 million capital case, and the revenue care cost is actually cheaper because we'll be running the service ourselves on commission externally. And I'm very pleased to report that yesterday we had the letter of revenue support in from the Joint Committee, Interim Chief Executive, Interim Managing Director, supporting our direction of travel and supporting the revenue model as set out in this case. So I'm asking the board to ratify the case today. Ratification then, subject to Welsh Government approval, will trigger the commissioning process which we've prepared and the procurement route is in place, and take assurance that the revenue is available to cover all the costs of the revenue aspects of this and the benefits realisation.
It's a very exciting opportunity for us to keep cutting edge of our technology here. So again, anything from committee members? I'm sure we'll give this people.
I was just going to say, the Performance and Finance Committee went on a visit to the Cancer Service some months ago, And I particularly, this business case was brought forward by colleagues within the department. And it did appear to me that the current experience with a mobile PET scanner is not a very favourable patient experience, put it that way. And I was really keen that this would come forward, so we were very pleased to see it.
Julie, did you have anything you want to ask on PET scanning?
But the only question that I had in the back of my head is that again, we've got this, it's meeting demand to at least 2028. So is that long-term vision in terms of the risk that it's going to be good for 2 years, but then we're going to need more capacity. So in terms of the future proof and the long-term investment in terms of capacity, whether we're thinking ahead, that's the challenge.
It's a fair chance. So the JCC have been looking to commission 3 of these across Wales. We're one of the corners, so that's North Wales and South Wales one. So there'll be national capacity as well as local capacity. We've got a South West Wales cancer strategy ourselves, which looks at how we're going to do self-imaging and some of this work. But your challenge is fair. I think with demand growing, with technology advancing and producing better outcomes for patients, we would need to be clear that that trajectory is serviceable by the technologies that we have. Really close eye on that.
Does the JCC have a sort of 10-year strategy? Does it have that future focus in its thinking at the minute?
It has a strategy for this component part in terms of the PET technologies and the diagnoses of that. In terms of the long-term direction travel, I'd have to check that.
So can we flag that up with the JCC then? Because Steve, we don't have you on the JCC any longer, do we? No. So, perhaps we can pick that.
That's an action check.
Okay, thank you. So can we approve then business case as set out? And we also approve the 12-month contract structure. Yeah, and then of course, we can also take assurance that longer revenue consequences, and we will also take an action to raise with the JCC the longer term implication. Thank you very much. And again, our appreciation out to you and the members of the Performance and Finance Committee, because we know the level of robust scrutiny you apply to these business cases. Thank you very much. So we move on to part 3, and I'm delighted to welcome Cathy Breeze. Croeso mawr i'n cyfarfod, Cathy. Welcome to the meeting. Lovely to see you again. And of course, we thought it would be very nice to take as our patient's story what's been happening over in the freestanding maternity unit since we took the decision to reopen. So, yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members, for very kind inviting and this opportunity to share with you. Parent's story really of a family who's recently birthed with us in the newly reopened birth centre, and it's an opportunity really of us to show the excellence of care that has been reopened for these families and the impact that that has for the families, but also the staff. So I'd like to make a start, if that's okay. If you could go to the next slide, please. Of the family, I'd like to introduce you to Isabel, Isaac and baby Rafaelos, who was born on the 17th of September at 3:53 a.m, weighing a very healthy 8 pounds and 1 ounces. Raffaello isn't Isabel and Isaac's first baby, and his older brother Theodore was born in Singleton Hospital 20 months ago. Isabel said, I had an assisted delivery the last time, so I was looking forward to something that was a bit more relaxed and straightforward. And Isabel said she'd been hoping to be the first mum who would use the birth centre once it was newly reopened. She said, I was 9 days overdue, and because I was late, I was hoping that he would hold off until the birth centre reopened. She got her wish, which is wonderful. I really wanted to come to a place like this. I knew it wasn't available before, so I was really chuffed when it turned out it was open the day that I went into labour. I knew after all of the research that I've been doing that having a water birth with a freestanding midwife was so much better for the second baby. I was really interested in all of that and excited to be able to go au natural, as she refers to it, for her recent birth. Of her previous birth in Singleton, Isabel said, I knew that support was available meant that it was going to be a better birth than the first, which was still a lovely birth, but this experience was just lovely. Isabel was so grateful to the midwives, and what she said was, I felt very well supported by the midwives. I was able to breathe through my contractions, able to be free and chilled, and it was just really nice. The staff were really supportive. They listened to me. I was just able to relax. I could put on the music I wanted. We're Christians, so worship music was all the way for them. And it was so nice to embrace our spirituality during the birth experience. I was really well coached through the whole thing. They supported me really well, and I felt that I was able to do it and that my body was able to do it. Something that we talk so much about in terms of the environment, isn't it? And I doubted myself, but they made me feel like I didn't need to doubt myself. Isabel believes that the service is going to be a great benefit to the mums of Swansea Bay. And she said, I think it's really good. It's a place to empower women to give birth. I think there's just less complications with it. But obviously, she said, obstetric units are there for a reason. And it's important that people can have that access, but have something like this that's straightforward for somebody with a low risk pregnancy. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. Midwifery matron there, Rhiannon Griffiths on the left, said the staff were finally pleased to be reopened. And she said the birth centre was reopened 3 years to the date since it was temporarily closed in 2021. And we were so pleased to be able to offer this option as a place of birth once again for the women and families of Swansea Bay. I'm really pleased to report we had our first birth in the unit overnight, and mum and baby were both doing well. And baby Raphaelis was born in our newly refurbished pool that's in the birth centre, something that the families really do appreciate, and supported by 2 of our midwives who aren't pictured, Julie Jones and Laura Pascoe. And Julie Jones, who goes next. Oh, there we go. Julie Jones, who's very, very camera shy, she wasn't pictured. What she said was, it was a real privilege to be present and welcome the first baby to the birth centre, having only opened hours before. There were hugs and there were tears, and there was a general sense of elation having been present to support Isabel and Isaac welcome their beautiful baby boy. When I left at the end of my shift, there was this calmness and utter euphoria, giving back my sense of purpose in being a community midwife, and a feeling of how great it was to be able to support families with choice around their birth and labour. So we just wanted to take this opportunity to share their story and offer our congratulations to the family and to the teams and to our whole community in having this service back open and really understanding the impact that this can have for our families. And what I can tell you is, as of this morning, we've had 4 babies in the birth centre, 3 boys, 1 little girl, and the teams are absolutely elated, as are the families, to have this facility. So thank you very, very much.
Oh. Well enough there. Oh, Nicola, do come in.
I just want to say thank you very much for sharing that wonderful story with us. It's really enlightened this morning. Just 2 questions. One was really around staff morale. Yes, it's been going great. And how are we communicating with expectant mums to share the options that have been?
Yeah. So one of the things that we were very, very keen to ensure in terms of our common strategy was that we were going to have a plan for what our communication will be with the community, having had our first birth. Now that we are there and we are thinking about, okay, where else do we need to be in terms of that communication, Richard and I will be looking at our comms plan, which is already drafted, to start thinking about those messages going out. Certainly from a perspective of the midwifery teams, that has gone out to all of their current population who are pregnant with us within Swansea Bay, and the first birth was actually a family from Morriston, so it just goes to show they will travel to the facilities where they are available. So we are seeing that really great spread, so it's great.
Oh, thank you. And we will want to add our congratulations and best wishes to the family. And just to say, brilliant news for the staff. And
yes,
we are so pleased that we could make that decision.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Kathy, as you know, I was fortunate enough to have a visit to the unit on Tuesday, yesterday, yeah. No, Monday. Oh, Monday afternoon, it wasn't yesterday. There was nobody birthing there at the time. It was lovely and calm, beautiful environment. And as we walked around, 2 families then came in, 2 separate families came in to review, and you could see, you know, the excitement in them. They were coming into this unit. The staff were feeling it. It was like there were 3 babies there then, so we've had another one since then. So I think it's brilliant. I really hope it gives us what we want.
Thank you, Deb. You're absolutely right. We're having an awful lot of interested families who are coming for tours, who are planning their births that are coming up. So having the opportunity to come in and have our parent craft education within our birth environment as well is really, really beneficial to the family.
I've also got a member of my family who was so disappointed that they couldn't give birth in the birthing unit last year. So I know how much this means to the family in the area.
Thank you, Richard. Do come in.
No, that's great. It's a lovely story, isn't it? And it's great to hear both from the family's perspective and the staff perspective, the sense of purpose that the staff have got in terms of having that facility for them to do what they do best. So it's great. So please pass on our thanks.
Kathy's already there as well, that's great.
Great, thank you very, very much. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming to join us. You're very welcome to stay. As you know. So, thank you very, very much. Thank you. And we send you all our best wishes. Thank you. So that's lifting our spirits. That's great. Thank you. So we move now on to part 4 of our agenda, where we look at what's happening in the board scrutinises and oversees delivery against our plans, as I said. And we are very heavily reliant again on our performance and finance committee here in this respect. So Pat and Rita, want to give us some feedback from the committee meetings that they've been since the board last met.
Yes, I can cover off July, and Rena's going to speak to August because I wasn't there at the time. But I mean, apart from the financial plan, which we'll deal with when Darren does that presentation, there's probably a couple of things from July. We're getting now reports from the service groups. They're coming in on a rolling basis monthly, and they are much improved. They are clear, they're consistent in how they report their financial management, reconciled to the finance figures. So it's a really good step forward that we're getting that presence and in every meeting. And then one other big issue really from July, which comes regularly, is endoscopy performance, and the committee's keeping a very close eye on that, because there's real challenges there about the backlog, etc. I think it's in TI. I think the target is 80 for de-escalation, 80% in less than 8 weeks, and currently is about 22% there, isn't it? At the moment. So that is something we're keeping an eye on, what actions and solutions are coming forward.
Rita, do you want to come in and then we'll take any points?
August committee, obviously, again, a concentration on the financial position, which we'll be going through. In terms of performance, we are getting a report to each committee on the targeted intervention areas, as well as the overview performance report. So there is particular consideration of the areas that are in targeted intervention. We had primary, community and therapies along to, as Pat referred to, we're having a different service group to each committee. And one of the considerations we were talking about was the increase in variable pay, which we've discussed in the context of finance here. And we were particularly querying the extent to which that was linked to the additional beds and the additional beds within the community. So we were given assurance on that. Cancer performance has been an area that we've been, again, concerned about. It is in our targeted intervention areas, but we had a specific report on cancer, and it was pleasing to note the areas that we were particularly concerned about on cancer, which includes gynecology, lower GI, breast, were actually improving. So we were pleased to see that. I think most of the rest is sort of general, but the business cases that we received earlier this board were considered at the August committee as well in quite a lot of detail.
Do you want to take anything now, or do you want to leave it for your report on targeted intervention?
I'll do it through the report, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, is that okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything for Pat or Rena or the committee before we move into both the finance report at month 5 and then our revised annual plan? We're happy to move into Darren's report.
Thank you. If I may, I'll deal with month 5 pause. And then we'll go to them. Month 5 it will be brief because I know again committees had a look at this. But just to report to the board the formality of the position at month 5, which is on page 4 of the report, £6.9 million overspent in month, which is our best month to date, but still not on the trajectory of recovery that we need to meet our obligations. That brings the health board to £39.8 million overspent to date, backing towards it 50.1, which I'll address in further discussion shortly. The charts at the bottom of that page just show you the movement in months. And also on the right-hand side show how savings deliveries increased substantially in month 5 above the line, which is pleasing to see and is required to help underpin the plan. The illustration at the bottom of page 5 gives you the breakdown in large scale of how the financial position in the year to date is made up, with the planned deficit of 20.9 and the operational run rate running 16.8. Like that. Savings at 2.1 million shortfall there, but that was 3.6 million the month before, so we come back a little on that. Page 6 just gives you a further breakdown and just perhaps to set the context for the discussion on the financial recovery. The main part of the table at the top there, table 3, gives you perspective on where the operational pressures of the organisation are. You consider that was 16.8 million to month 5. 1.1 million of that was income, 13.1 million pay, 2.9 million continuing healthcare, amongst lots of other component parts, but those will form part of the focus in terms of the recovery. The rest of the report over the next few pages just gives board members assurance on the action being undertaken to help improve the financial position. And on pages 11 and 12 of the report, you'll see the savings distribution and how that's increased from previous months. So we're now chasing around 34 million pounds worth of savings. Since then, that's become 45 million. So clearly step change in forward, getting through the processes we've introduced to do that. Page 12 and 13 just draw out the capital position. We're still forecasting a discretionary capital balance plan this year. There are some risks in there, as there always are at this stage of the year, but conversations with Glasgow have given us assurance that they have line of sight on those risks and the funding will flow through the course of the year. We also have a number of small proposals that we're planning to use capital plan around Gargoyle, Phyllis Parade, some land for Morriston. We're confident on the majority of those, though we're still working through Gargoyle's clear cabinets. Just to draw up the cash position on page 14, we are forecasting a cash gap because of our deficit, but we work through that in discussion with Welsh Government in terms of recovery planning, but also in terms of future cash should that be needed. And it's a very real concern for us that the cash needs to be in the system to pay our suppliers and our very valuable workforce. Risks set on page in section 7 on page 14. We agreed at Performance and Finance Committee to introduce a new risk, which is around recurrent savings delivery, which I welcome. And the top of page 15 then just there's a line for both parts of this report. Just ask the board to consider the position where we are and take assurances of the actions available before I talk about the plan, Chair. Happy to pause there.
Thank you very much, Simon. So on month 5 then, any specific issues? Maria?
And it's a difficult position. It is, and it needs to improve. I think that there's a huge challenge for us as a health board. My concern is around monitoring the indirect impact that some of our decisions may be happening now, so that we have full view of what is coming our way. So, for example, we talk a lot about agency, but it's understanding those indirect impacts that actually might impact on the ministerial priorities, because you ask us to take assurance on that. But I think of agencies, and I think, for example, of, we stop diagnostic weights because of cutting agency staff. So what that will impact further down the line on clinical agency, it will link out on rotas, it will link out on flow, and ultimately on waiting times. So are we monitoring the impact of the decisions and the practicalities of that as they materialise in the real world?
So the answer. So in terms of the overall performance monitoring, the performance monitoring runs alongside the finances and this under my portfolio. The decisions we've made to date in this year, and I'll bring this to life a little more in the next section, have been deliberately constructed not to destabilise our ministerial delivery at this point. And I'll explain the differential between those. On the variable pay side of things, we expect our service groups and our corporate directors to workforce plan through the challenges. And whilst our ambition is to remove actually agency costs would be the ultimate view on this. I'd like to see that done through planning, recruitment and workforce modelling. So that's what we encourage people to do. As the financial position gets more challenged, we have to be more instructive on that. And that's unfortunate because we like to get through the planning process rather than be direct. So at this stage, to answer your question directly, yes, we are monitoring. We also expect further difficult challenges to come to appraise the board on should the plan as set out slip from waste.
Thank you for assurance.
I think it's those governance arrangements and how they work in practice and the information we get as a result of that. But that is going to be more information going to the Finance Committee on how that actually works. But is that oversight on the very practical things that these savings will have?
Yes, as we move into this different territory, you was absolutely right. The monitoring and accountability mechanisms do need to be stronger, and we have a view on that.
So was there anything you wanted to add there for management of the variable pay agenda, given we recognise that having permanent is clearly better for patient care. And we know this, there are many reports that indicate that to us. That's obviously the objective, to take out the agency spend, etc. recognising that when we need temporary staff, you know, we've done various vetting to make sure that they're at the right level, etc. So do you want to talk us through what actually you want to change?
Absolutely, and recognising there is an obligation on us as a health board through non-pay negotiations with our trade unions about reducing agency work. It's something we're working with our trade unions partners anyway. So it's the right decision in terms of better patient outcomes as well. And equally in terms of team morale, about having that fixed team where you know what you're for and how it feels to work. So in terms of those principles being the right decisions for us to take, they're multifaceted. It isn't just about the financial position. In terms of the variable pay work, what we've seen over the course of the last couple of months is that perhaps we moved, spend has gone down. We've made significant work, for example, in the medical team, working with the medical team around removal of that. There's still some work for us to do around additional duties, linked to job planning. So there's still some opportunities for us there to work. Equally, what we're seeing is because of the pressures in our system, we've got challenges around managing of risk and those human behaviours. So what we're going to do is look at working in particular places to try and understand that better, to try and help our staff understand the best fill. Darren talked about that workforce planning and expectation of the service groups. There's that sort of bigger picture operational workforce planning, but there's actually the human behaviour that comes into play there in helping us understand why do we feel in that way, why do we act in that way. So I think there's plenty more opportunity for us to understand that better across our services, and as we go into winter, that will give us that opportunity to do that so that we can adjust what we do and what we measure appropriately.
Raj, I think you want to add to that.
No, thank you, Jan. And I should say what I would add in is actually myself and Dr. Mehta is actually meeting up with the service group medical directors regularly on a weekly basis to monitor variable pay. And I would say that the fact that from looking at the figures that I had comparing to 2022 and 2023, we've already made a significant decrease in spend up to by 15% actually. But there is the agency spend, which is actually hard to recruit areas. And that is actually the problem. And what I would also add in is the fact that we are actually having conversations across the board with regional working with our colleagues to see whether there are actually areas that we can actually work across the piece actually, because it's not, all the solution could not be found in Swansea PA alone. So we will completely recognize that. But it is still a long way ahead, but I think those conversations are already started.
I think we have, just adding on to that, I think we have to both be cognizant of the winter months coming up. Because if we are where we are now, then your pre-planning for winter will be absolutely vital not to impact adversely again. We're doing it.
Thank you, Gina. And that's why winter preparedness is one of the items in October. Rena.
Just to say that obviously I'm taking over sharing workforce, and I've already been talking to Sarah about the fact that we need to have a sustainable workforce model going forward in the same way as we need our sustainable financial plan. But I think it needs to be probably on a regional footing, as we've said, and in specifically in certain specialities, probably on a national basis, because of the fact that all health boards are having difficulty recruiting in certain areas. And how do we go about making sure that we are training people or encouraging people to go into those disciplines where we haven't got people? So I think this is a really big piece of work that but I certainly think it's one of the things we need to put down on the agenda for the joint meeting with our lab. Thank you.
Dan, can I just ask you to say a little bit more around the cash position and the point at which we would ask for any strategic finance assistance, because it's, you know, an important issue, not just for the board and staff, but for the public in terms of, you know, health bodies having cash flow issues. So can you just talk us through how that works?
It's a very well established part of health board and governance, Chair. As we get, so we always forecast the cash flow as per the report, and this goes into the monetary letters, which are shared with government routinely as well. So that's the first thing to say. There's a no surprises element to this. It's developed through the year. Clearly, the closer you are to financial sustainability, the less the issue about cash management features as an organisation. When we get to early Q4, so just after Christmas, we get a formal request from government to submit a strategic cash requirement. and that's submitted by myself then as an accounting officer to them, and that's worked through with government, and we reach an accommodation where that strategic cash support is agreed. That's the same for all health boards in Wales. It's not unique, it's one of the Wales position at the moment.
That's really helpful, and that will give assurance into people who watch this subsequently. Thank you. So in terms of the month 5 position, so we have considered it, and we've been listening it down very carefully in terms of the cash position, capital position, the whole issue around risks, and the addition of the risk around recurrent revenue savings. But this is a really important point for this board, given perhaps in previous years over reliance on non-recurrent savings and the expectations of us. I know you're picking up your point around assurance in respective actions. I think we can we offer support at the minute for the actions being taken as part of the route towards the board being able to take assurance on these matters? Would that be okay?
Welcome.
Thank you. So can we move then into the revised plan for the rest of the financial year?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And just for the public really to know that this document was taken through on a page-by-page basis a fortnight ago, and there have only been minor updates to that document since to the independent members had a really thorough reading session. I'm grateful up front for the support and the scrutiny board members on this journey. It's been an incredibly complex piece of work. It's touched every part of the organisation, and I've had a significant opportunity to bring the matters that arise through this in front of board and executive team members to formulate where we're at. The full documents attached to Appendix 2, and a summary of where we've got to is pages 9 to 11 in the main report. What the report shows is after a significant amount of engagement with the organisation through what we call star chambers, we identified a significant enhanced number of potential opportunities for savings. When we played that through in terms of the overall structure of the finances, that gave us a base number of 85.5 million. That's neither a forecast nor a plan. It's just it's a navigation point to help us understand what the activities have been taken forward. Within that 85.5 million, I applied and have applied for discussion on a risk adjustment of 13 million. So that could be better than 85 million, the value of 13 million, which reflects historical savings delivery in the organisation. So historically, we've probably got to about 69% of the savings that we've flagged up, or that those had slipped across time. And therefore, that planning assumption sits as a choice at the moment in the overall construct of the plan for the rest of the year. We've also, through this process, because we've not just worked on service groups and my corporate colleagues and their budget holders, but also been back to some of the central work that we do around VAT recovery, work with the private finance teams, lots of other components which are included in the performance and finance committee reporting. So there's some of nearly 17 million of non-recurrent opportunities this year. And whilst that's incredibly welcome, the lessons of previous years suggest we need to be very transparent about what that looks like, and that we cannot rely on that in terms of future financial stability. I've also, in this process, introduced slightly targets to service groups and corporate directors where we issue control totals based on an assessment of what future opportunities could come into play in the next 6 months. And the impact of bringing all of this together gives us a line of sight potentially to a number of 50.8 million. That assumes all of the risk is managed out. That's a really important point. It also assumes that the non-recurrent opportunities are used for county doctors. So given that, the scenario set out on page 10 of my report shows that the most likely position based on the current configuration of how we deal with these challenges is 64.1 million. But there are further mitigations available should we be able to deliver all of the schemes that have come forward of 13 million, which could see us move towards a 50.8 million number. And things would have to change in terms of our operating practice, our accountabilities, and our delivery mechanisms to bring that through different ways of working with the position. In support of this and alongside this, the recovery and sustainability work is still underway and gathering momentum. That's working very, very directly on variable pay, and colleagues have already teased out some of the work that's happening there, which is coalescing on recovery and sustainability, working well with colleagues in nursing, allied health professionals, medical and workforce. We're also going through the process of reviewing investments made, and board members will be very aware that one of the assessments of Swansea is that we've invested money but not seen the benefits realised. But we are doing that work now in parallel for future opportunity. We've delivered the savings repository in detail, which includes benchmarking opportunities That will feature in a report to the PFC in October, Chair. And the recovery sustainability team are also enhancing controls across all our business systems. I've got 35 areas we're looking at the moment in terms of enhanced control. But the flavour of that is we're looking across staff, redeployment, recruitment, non-pay controls, and stock management, with everywhere where there's an opportunity for financial gain. One of the key things that's come up in conversation in the board so far today is that there are a number of challenging choices here. They're in the document, pages 21 and 22 in the detailed appendix. But we've also at this stage chosen to not take a further £26 million worth of savings opportunities in the spirit of maintaining our delivery ministerial targets, recognising we've not gone after beds, planned care delivery, our cancer targets, or our urgent emergency care system, or indeed at this stage, some of the opportunities that present themselves for continuing healthcare. We require a different conversation around that to maintain sort of partnership arrangements as well. So we haven't gone there. That 26 million will sit on the list and will be constantly reviewed and assessed, certainly through the 25-26 planning process, to see whether improvements in systems can allow for revenue release to be done in a much more structured way. And whilst the position I've set out is crucial, the nature of the non-recurrent support into this year, it's important again to be recognised. I'm labouring the point because where we've been, but we must deliver further recurrent savings to help us move into the right position for next year. The next year drive is set out in the document. So whilst this largely focuses on a recovery plan for this year, it does say that if we can end this year close to a run rate of around 4 million a month, which is the 50 million pressure, we can see a line of sight to a balanced plan within 2 to 3 years, depending on allocations from government and our savings ambitions. But that would be couched in a very different planning process where we would use allocations to manage new costs, but any savings would go against the underlying deficit. That's a principle we're working to. That's a principle in the planning guidance, and it's a very different way of working for the organisation. Also, along that journey, we've been asked by government to think when we would potentially get to 17 million, which was the control total set. And again, depending on the nature of savings that we pursue through the planning round that we're currently actively working on, that could be towards the end of Q3 in 25-26, potentially early Q2 26-27, 70 million as generous. So in summary, Chair, we've now got more granular detail and more plans than we've ever had linked to the financial improvement and linked to performance and delivery, which brings its own complexity, and that's why we're changing the way we work going forward on that. We must increase the delivery of these in 24-25 to get the best number possible. We must increase the recurrent position to build a foundation of success for future years. I'm very clear that this is a collective health board ask, and everybody is pulling weight on this, and that needs to continue, and we need to continue into future years to get to the sustainability we would crave. And we must end this year well to build into that AMTP cycle with a balanced and recovered position described clearly within that AMTP process for future years. A lot more detail in the report than that, will be a set of frame.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Darren. You've given us a lot of detail there again, and we all know just how much work this has been involved on everyone's part, particularly that we've led this work. So we want to put that on record because we recognise just how much has gone into the reduction of these finances. And Performance and Finance Committee met yesterday. Updates from that and key messages for the board, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this has been the subject of ongoing scrutiny by the committee. And moving forward, we've had discussions that really there are two aspects that we need to monitor and gain assurance on as we move forward. So we've got the 24-25 financial performance. In effect, it'll be the landing plan for this year. We aren't where we want to be this year, as reflected in the risk rating of 25. We've had very significant run rate issues, and we still have a level of reliance on non-recurrent savings and balance sheet opportunities to try and move down towards that 50 million that we reported in May. But as you've just said, Jan, at the same time, we do have to recognise the work of finance colleagues, the executive and service groups in delivering a level of savings with higher recurrent savings than we've seen in previous years. So I think we've got to recognise that. The other aspect then where we need assurance is about the medium and longer term financial sustainability. And in the first instance, that's how savings and investments this year are impacting on 25-26. And it is really essential that as a minimum, we get down to that sustainable 50 million by April 25, which will give us that chance of moving down over the 2 or 3 years down to a financially balanced position. So that's going to be an area of key scrutiny by the committee. And as part of that, what we've asked Darren for is really in the next meeting to look at the role and scope of the Recovery and Sustainability Programme Board. In terms of reference, the membership, the meeting frequency and the support it's going to be given. One of the main concerns is that service group directors are included as part of that membership as key in this. And the kind of board's role in the development then of cross-cutting health board recurrent savings, particularly focused on efficiency and effectiveness. Key things what we've been looking at is updates on savings across those thematic programmes that we saw emerge in May, updates on the use of benchmarking to inform savings opportunities, a real focus on variable pay and improving that grip and control on variable pay, which obviously a lot of work's been done, but that's ongoing work across all service groups. Updates on the red savings options that aren't included in our landing plan to see if there's any more of those could be recognised. And really updates on how the review of base budgets is progressing. This is work that I know finance has started, but just, you know, how are we getting agreement and look at those base budgets, and of course keeping that watch and brief on impact and risks. So it'll be those 2 dimensions that we'll be looking at.
Any other members of Performance and Finance want to add to? Rena?
The only thing I've just emphasised, and I've already said this at committee, that obviously Welsh Government last year didn't seem to feel that they were fully aware of the non-recurrency of some of the savings that we had utilised to get to our base at the end of the year. So I think we need to make a big emphasis on the fact that within this line of sight, I think it was 17.1 million worth of non-recurrent opportunities, which we are again utilising, which is, you know, okay, we've got to do it because of where we are this year, which, as Pat said, isn't where we want to be. But we are doing that in full, if you like, not acknowledgement that it isn't the way to go and that we are looking to improve on that. But I do think we need to flag it quite much in the report back to Welsh Government on this. And the other thing was, I mean, I take Darren's point that we didn't want to go to the 12.5 of the red savings that need further work. But as the year rolls forward, there may be the opportunity to bring those forward. And of course, as a committee, we will be looking for that, because the work just continues. It doesn't stop at the page where we are now. It will continue.
Steve.
So, thanks, Chair. The question that I tend to ask in Performance and Finance, and I'll ask it again now, Darren, I'll quote you directly. Everybody's pulling together on this. And my question is everybody really pulling together on this? I mean, everybody in this room knows the urgency, but there's another 14,000 people out there. Do they all understand the urgency of what we're asking to do?
To answer in turn, Steve, I think it's about penetration and depth. I've been out to meet all of the service delivery teams and their senior teams to talk about finance, to explain the context of how we've got here and what we're trying to achieve. I think it's fair to say that engagement and commitment is there. And through the start chamber process that's chaired by the chief executive, we saw the creativity and things that we need for that. Through things like the Richard's week message and through the conversations that my finance business partners have locally, we are getting ideas up from different parts of the organisation now, and we're about to open a savings forum where people can just type in their ideas and stay in discussion, because sometimes colleagues with the best ideas don't have access to me. They can have access to me, but they don't know how to do that, and therefore that's coming through. I think it's also fair to say that not everywhere is the same, and we need to make sure that penetration and communication is done to a greater degree. And lots of what we're asking people to do are really difficult, so we need to support them to do that as well, and not just expect ideas to come and like the aggregate of those ideas be the solution here. We've got to help people make the change and drive things forward. So it's it's a wide-ranging answer because it is a wide-ranging
Sure.
issue. But I think that the upper echelons of the organisation certainly, and things are coming back very well, but lots of the good ideas are at the front line, and that's where I'd like to tap into next through some information.
I think it's important to reiterate as well the change in principal approach that you mentioned earlier, Darren, because one of the things we have talked long and hard about the numbers. We've talked long and hard about the accountability of people to deliver and each level of responsibility to make sure that everyone understands their responsibility and accountability. But for me, we cannot lose sight of the fact that every single person who has responsibility for cost centre management has to understand that their base budget is realistic to start with. So that going back to that zero-based budgeting is the platform from which they can then propel themselves forward. But it also means they can have more meaningful conversation and negotiation discussions when it's necessary. I don't think we should lose sight of that.
I want to come back on that.
I really welcome that point, and the challenge for how we will describe the process to even do that from Finance Committee members and from the board is welcome. It's not easy, but that doesn't mean the same not for the challenge, so don't mind difficulties. What the, I touched on it earlier in a different point around that, what the planning process is doing for next year is asking for an efficient bed model, a demand and capacity model to see it as a continuing healthcare approach, a prescribing approach. There are 12 individual things that Nurse Raya describing as the things we want to commission to formulate the plan. That will give me a basis from which to set budgets in a very different way. The challenge will be is if the ask of that is higher than the money we've got, then we have to work through the iteration of how that application is done transparently and through good governance. But that's a challenge to do when we get there, and we need to do the right first step.
Form of challenge from a knowledge perspective, isn't it? That's my point.
Yeah.
I wanted to move away from the challenge word because I think it's really important. But when I walk across this organisation, the thing that always strikes me is how innovative some of our staff is, how they're full of ideas of how we could do things better. And I think part of this process and part of what I would like to see in those terms of reference is not just about the risk control elements, which I'll be coming back to audit, as you know. But I want to see that, you know, how we're galvanising those thoughts, sharing that innovation, and actually how that features in our plans moving forward. So for me, this is a huge, it's not just to do it because it's the right thing to do. It's a huge opportunity for us to tap into behavioural science, to do the things that you've been talking about with the workforce, Sarah, around those cultures and behaviours and how we support them moving forward. But when you ask anybody in this organisation what gets in your way, they come up with tons of ideas of how we could do things more efficiently that would have a huge impact on our patients and quality of our services.
Yeah. Yes, and it'd be good to see how the Recovery and Sustainability Board will tap into that. That is, of course, the company that's health workers around ownership and actually understanding that there is no way out coming. This is for real, and then everybody needs to be engaged in the sustainability agenda. Thank you. May I ask a question around the Recovery and Sustainability Board, and it is one I've asked before. As you know, we don't have a formal performance and accountability framework. And we do have a mechanism already where everyone who will be around the Recovery and Sustainability Board already sits, management board. So can you talk me through how the Recovery and Sustainability Board will be different and will have that grip? And I'm taking it that audit will oversee governance events around recovery and sustainability, and finance and performance will be looking at what's actually happening around the savings target.
That is the case. Yes, we've had a discussion between us as chairs, and we've shared what we want from each element so that we can bring that assurance to the board.
So in the absence of that formal framework, what I'm looking for is the assurance that it will be different and that audit will be overseeing that for us. There may not be one for now, that we may want to come back to it, but it's one that we need to give the assurance to the audit committee on, part of the full board on.
I'd be happy to do that, Chair. Just a very direct response to your challenge. I think it's worth saying that in public. The the work that we've done provides a level of granularity and planning assumption that we haven't had before, which makes it easier to hold to account. So we know what the proposals are, we know by when, we know who's doing it. What the RNS board will do is hold my colleagues in this room and service group directors equally to account for the delivery of a position that we will agree with them. And if they are unable to do that with the means that they have, they need to find the next things that will allow them to do that to progress. It's much more sophisticated than that, but having the base for the action to hold to account is a step forward above perhaps previous systems.
Thank you. And we will have that formal performance and accountability framework in place for 25-26. But that's one of the first things that we will look at. So can I ask if there are any more questions or comments on plan that we will need to submit to Welsh Government tomorrow? So we've talked very clearly about being upfront what's non-recurrent, the level of recurrent savings, and how we recognise that it's the recurrent saving agenda that we need to focus for sustainability. We've recognised the imperative of delivering against ministerial priorities, and Richard, there is an issue for you as the accountable officer there, indicating to the board we can't move away from ministerial priorities at the moment. We've looked at the roles of performance and finance committee and of audit committee, and then we will be doing more work on the terms of reference and role of the recovery and sustainability board. And we do need to be clear that when we make this decision, this is the forecast that will go into Welsh Government, and this is what this organisation will be held to account against. So when we say what we're going to land, it has to land. Yeah. And Richard, did you want to say anything about that? Or is the leadership board yesterday reinforced that view, didn't it?
It did. So the NHS leadership board yesterday, as usual, different. The direction from Welsh Government is that there's an expectation that there's a need for health boards to deliver on their forecasts as they were set earlier in the year. There is naturally some concern given the financial performance across NHS Wales of where a number of health boards are off against their plans. There's a need to recoup that. We have been made aware that there may be some additional funding that's available to help with performance. That's entirely contingent on the forecast being delivered in the first instance before that's made available. So it's the same message that the health board has been given, and it's really clear. It's the ministerial priorities. It's delivering its money. It's the assumption that's been made is the 226, is that the right 220 that can be covered, but that's what's currently in the health board for the collective health board forecasts.
Thank you. So shall we move then to the decision we're going to make? So that's set out in the paper for you. So we're obviously acknowledging where we're starting off from with the 85.5, and we're acknowledging the fact that there is some non-recurrent sort of work in place and opportunities to help us as a one-off, but we're very much noting the need for recurrent savings to as part of sustainability. And we can approve enhanced measures to address the 13.3 million risk adjustment, which Darren took us through. And then we approve the setting of control totals, again, for the delegated areas to stretch that delivery to reach 50.8 million at the year end. So that's really important there. And then the minute calls on us to acknowledge the choices, but I think we have to be very clear that we are working on the basis that the board is not in a position to contravene the imperative ministerial priority. So we need to be strong, but that's one of the bases on which we worked this. And then we acknowledge, and again, the clear need for further recurrent savings to strive to improve the year position and the year end. Red schemes haven't been included, but they will be continually reviewed, and we approve that. And then, of course, we are looking at a different approach in the new framework for 25-26 and beyond as we move back towards financial sustainability. So with all that, the board is approving this paper for submission to Welsh Government on the understanding that this is the forecast that we will be judged against. Happy to approve? Well, not wrong verb. Happiness does come into this really. Are we in a position to approve? And again, Darren, we reiterate thanks that Pat set up so eloquently as well to you, your teams and everyone who's been involved in getting us to this. Thank you. So if we move on now then, so we're moving on to performance. Yeah. Or three, Darren?
I'm afraid you've got me again, Chair.
Oh,
But can
take
I
a breath.
can I propose that because we've got a target intervention paper, I won't cover the target intervention in mine.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is draw out some of the other performance measures in mine briefly to give the completed picture. Is that okay?
Or would it help if I do the TI bit first?
Let's do that. Give Dan a little bit of a.
Yeah,
Give it
I'll do
time.
the TI bit first and then
Yes.
saves you having to skip over them as well. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the TI reports in the same format as previously, so second time it's come to board for assurance. Very little change in month, it's fair to say, so probably the biggest element of discrepancy now is in the healthcare acquired infections, which we'll go into a little bit more detail further on, but I'll start at the top of it. So we've got cancer to start with, so we report in July at the moment, which brought us in at 59%, which is on our trajectory. Board will be aware that we've committed to deliver 60% by the end of September. We won't have the September position till the end of October, but I believe we are on track for that to be delivered, which is good news for us. A bit of concern in the backlog volumes that we're seeing in the overall patient tracking list at the moment. Most of that is attributed to skin cancer, so dermatology in particular, and colorectal, so lower GI. The skin tumour side has a delivery plan to recoup that in October and reduce that backlog. Conversion rates are relatively low, so we're not anticipated to have a negative impact on overall delivery. But the demand throughout the summer months has been more significant than we anticipated, and there was some staffing issues that prevented them recovering from that position early. But they have a plan to deliver that in October, and I'm waiting for the delivery plan to come through from the colorectal team to reduce the backlog that we're seeing in lower GI. Of concern from a delivery perspective, board will be familiar with it's gynecology in the main, although we are seeing some recovery in gynecology and urology, which we are reducing the backlog there thanks to the implementation of the robot. Just for members to be aware, the majority of the patients we've treated in the robot so far, though, are Howell Dda residents rather than Swansea based. So we're not actually seeing the detrimental impact on our overall performance at the moment because of the way the patients have been waiting, and the clinical need of the patients means the Howell Dda patients have been taken priority, because obviously we provide that service for that population as well. Plan care still on track, and we're delivering in all the areas that we have been overall since we've gone into targeted intervention. We are also seeing a slight improvement in the follow-up not booked area, which is the one that we haven't seen any movement on, and that I gave assurance that we would see going into the second half of the year, and that has now started due to a very detailed piece of work we've undertaken with DHCW, our own information department, and our risk management team. And I expect that to be progressive now as we go into Q3. Very little change in the other measures in 104 weeks, etc. What I will say is the trajectory for 104 weeks becomes a little bit more acute in the second half of the year. That's a bit more of a challenge for us. And just to reference the point Richard made, there's an opportunity at the moment for boards to ask for some additional support in the delivery of the plan care trajectories in particular. Alongside that, health boards have been offered the opportunity to reprofile how they get to the zero position by the end of March. We're going to take advantage of that because that smooths our trajectory out a little bit and gives us more opportunity to keep within our profile, but still deliver the target at the end of the financial year. So we're going to do that alongside the accountable officer letter back to Welsh Government. It won't change our delivery, it just smooths the trajectory out and keeps us on a green trajectory rather than dipping off, because we've been quite bullish in what we thought we could deliver in September and October. Moving on to UEC, August has been a challenging month, as we acknowledged earlier on. It's been the same across the whole of NHS Wales, and it follows the same pattern we had last year. So it seems as though we've got a bit more of a pattern that August is going to be a pinch point for us going forward. It is down to the lack of flow out of hospitals, as well as the higher demand for patients coming in. That said, we have maintained some fairly positive progress in some of the measures, and particularly the ambulance handover, even though the improvement has been lower for August, it's still an improvement on the baseline position that we went into targeted intervention on. Looking at where we are for September, we anticipate September will recover. And then looking at the full 2 quarters for 24-25, we're anticipating that the 2 quarters will deliver the best performance we've had in the last 2 years in the urgent emergency care measures going forward. So that is positive. We know there's much more work to be done. And we've got a UEC Reset Summit that's taking place on the 2nd of October, just to make sure we're focusing our efforts in the right way and working across all of the boundaries that we need to for UEC. CAMS, I'm really pleased to say we're in a report in July informally in the paper, Chair, but that was due to the timing of the submission. We've now had the August performance through, and the gap for us was in part 1A. So the target was 80%. We delivered 72% in July. We've delivered 84% in August. So we're now delivering on all of those 3 measures for CAMS. The de-escalation criteria means that we have to deliver that for 3 months in a row. So we're hopeful that we will do that going forward, and then hopefully we may be able to get de-escalated from the CAMS monitoring. And then healthcare acquired infections. We predicted that August was going to be a bit of an increase for us. Again, it follows the patterns that we've seen in previous years. Other health boards are seeing the same increase as we are, but it's probably a bit more of an increase than we anticipated. I'll just hand over to Angela to give us a bit more detail on that one.
Thanks, Deb. So as you mentioned, the key point in regards to our healthcare associated infection performance is the increase in incidence of C. diff infections in August and then going into September. And whilst there are some seasonal changes seen in terms of the number of C. diff infections in the summer months, which is also mirrored across Wales, our numbers are currently higher, but that is down to our higher starting baseline position. And a number of immediate actions have been taken to address the current increase. There's been a root cause analysis being undertaken to elicit any key themes and learning from the cases we've seen, and a gold C. diff high incidence management group has been established with representation from all service groups and support services to look at the immediate actions we need to take whilst we are maintaining our ongoing focus on the compliance with IPC standards and audits and our anti-performance stewardship.
That's excellent. And that's it for the update, Chair. We've got the formal meeting with Welsh Government on Friday, and then the next round with the Chief Executive of NHS Wales is in October.
Very much. And that, we always must remember that this organisation started really well on the planned care agenda, and it's very, very positive across a number of our service areas, and well done on CAMS as well. And we hopefully will sustain that. But Anne-Louise, I know you were concerned about the spike in August and what it might mean. A little bit from there, that it's actually a little bit of a trend.
Yeah. I was wondering whether it's to do with population health as much as what happens in the hospital, and are people coming in to hospital with it, whether it's diagnosed or not, and is it to do more specifically or more generally with population health and the healthy diet that we're looking at as well under population health? Is it that people's gut health has deteriorated? It's just it's almost an unquenchable infection, this one, and I just wonder whether it's more, no amount of hand washing and bare below the elbows seems to make that much impact on this particular one, and it's markedly different from some of the other infections that we seem to have managed to have got a grip on. So I just would be more interested in kind of the wider view of where C. diff is coming from and how we control it.
And Angela answers some specifics on that, but just generally, we know overcrowding is a factor. So particularly on the Morriston Hospital side, where we know we've got high occupancy rates, that does limit our recovery from any C. diff outbreaks that we have.
But is it only in Morriston that we're looking at it?
No, it's not. And that seems a bit, because we've now got an outbreak in Leith, which doesn't have the same overcrowding problem, but it is a factor, particularly in the pattern we see in Morriston Hospital. And when we look at the hand washing example, we didn't have C. diff problems during COVID, where our hygiene was far improved. Our overcrowding was probably reduced as well at the same time, so it's probably difficult to pinpoint the impact that has, but good hand hygiene does have a positive impact on our overall infection risk. But I'll let Angela answer some of the more specifics.
Thanks, Deb. I think as Deb said, there's an element of transmission, and we can look at that through our genome sequence, and we can see if there are clusters of particular presentations, and we can then match them into the incidence of transmissions. And there are some, but you're right, that is not the whole picture. We've seen an increase in community presentations, which is quite marked over the last 2 months. And we've also seen an increase of patients presenting who are actually then toxin positive. So we normally run about 50%, we're now over 60%. So there is definitely a significant increase of actual toxin positive patients. You're absolutely right that there are some patients who are at higher risk of developing C. diff, and we're looking at doing some risk assessments. So patients who are, for example, on certain type of medications like proton pump inhibitors have a higher risk of developing C. diff. So they're changing the sort of setup in their body, and therefore they're at higher risk. Equally, patients who've received a number of antibiotic courses before they even enter the hospital are at higher risk, and frail elderly patients generally at higher risk as well. Patients taking higher doses of laxatives are at higher risk as well. So are we able to map some sort of risk profile of the patient and then look at how we treat them differently possibly, and more carefully than they enter a high risk hospital environment? And I think this is the sort of areas we need to go. Patients who also have recurrent infections of C. diff present at a higher risk. So really, is it about looking at our patients in front of us and being then able to manage them differently in terms of their higher risk profile? I think that's the sort of work we are currently undertaking.
Thank you. And if I could ask another one, it looks as if we are an outlier, but Deb, you mentioned that we started on from a higher position. Is the same picture being seen across the other health bodies as well, that it isn't just Swansea Bay that has a particular problem?
Yeah, it is absolutely seen in all health boards. There's an increase seen across Wales. As I mentioned, there is that seasonal component. We have started on a higher position prior to that increase. So we are still showing higher numbers, but that picture is definitely mirrored, and we're taking quite close advice on Public Health Wales in terms of the actions other health boards are taking to learn at an early stage.
We'll remit to Quality and Safety Committee and release the detail of this and the deep dive work, and ask the committee to do that on behalf of the board, please.
Sure.
So Deb, do we come back to you, or you?
That's the chair. Thank you very much.
So any other points? Deb, on that? So we'll consider the report, obviously. Sorry.
Just a question around cancer. I did ask it yesterday in Quality and Safety. In the report that we're going to be hearing now as well, there's stats there about 305 patients are waiting in excess of 63 days. So just wondering, do we know roughly how long patients are waiting over that time frame? Yes, so we monitor over 62 days, and then we monitor against over 104 days. Our 104 volume has come right down, so we've got about 80 patients waiting in the longest bracket. The reasons that is a bit of a mix, a lot of it is patient choice, where they want to defer treatment, and a lot of it is getting to the decision treat and actually doing the surgical interventions. But that's come right down. So we are targeting the very long waits, whilst the overall over 62 waits, unfortunately, is grown slightly.
So we considered the report. We take assurance from everything Deb and Angela have told us about the work underway. We'll remit to Quality and Safety, particularly on HCAI. And plus, as well, Deb, when you meet Welsh Government colleagues, it's important to keep impressing that we are an organisation that delivers against planned care. And we do hope that this will be a criterion they'll take into account at the end, in respect of where the additional consequentials for the planned care actually go.
That's feedback we've had so far, Chair, is that they want to make sure that health boards that can deliver are able to deliver. So hopefully that will put us in a positive position.
Yeah, that's good. And that's an important message that for us to get out to staff as well in this respect. Thank you. So Darren, shall we come back to amendment 5 then?
Thanks, Chair. And I'll just pick up some sort of complementary measures rather than go through the whole depth of the report. I was going to start on page 24, and perhaps to make board members aware, PFC yesterday we had a detailed discussion on stroke, good emergency care and planned care, substantive papers on those items. So I'm not going to touch on those here, and Deb's already picked them up at the end. Just a few measures really. The red response times for ambulance release were 44.9% in August against the 65% target. It's 49.3% today, which is a little bit of an improvement. That wanted to take us to page 27, where the traditional sort of 4-hour ED access target is, which doesn't feature actually in target intervention, but it's a measure we're all very familiar with. That was 79.12 in July, 76.67 in August, recognising pressures Deb's already very eloquently described. But it's above 77 today, just recovering, and that's an unvalidated position, so I'd expect to see some good performance there. That compares very favourably nationally as well. We shouldn't lose sight of that. The optimised patient numbers on page 31, again, that's in TI, but it was 246 at the time of reporting, it's 217 today, so there has been an improvement in patient numbers. And then the next, so a big chunk of the report picks up the things we just touched on in terms of plan of care, infection prevention and control. I did take an action yesterday to look at radiotherapy access, and I've had a bit of a report on that, but I'm going to write that up for performance and finance colleagues and share that around, because there's some explanations for that. To page 44 of the report, then adult mental health is set out, which isn't part of target intervention, and just to confirm to the board that in terms of mental health assessment, interventions and caregiver planning, we continue to perform very, very well there, and again, compare very well nationally. We do have challenges around our psychological therapy access at 26 weeks, which is the bottom chart there. That currently running at 61%. We've asked our mental health colleagues for an update on a plan to recover that, because that's been a very gradually deteriorating position, largely on new presentations and work. Page 45 picks out CAMS. I won't cover CAMS, but again, to just highlight that neurodevelopmental disorder access for children is still very challenging for us. It's a national phenomenon, and there's a huge amount of work going on to try to address that as well. On page 49 of the report, pressure ulcer numbers are reported, and it's a good month in July, the lowest month in the reporting period here. And there appears to be a step change in falls numbers as well. Every fall is a fall too many, I know that, so I'm not condoning that, but actually there is an improvement there and a sustainability there as well. Incidents are set on page 50, which according to safety committee would have covered. Sickness absence, 6.67% in months on page 52. That's high, it's our best for 13 months, so it's a seed of recovery rather than something to rely on just yet. And then just on page 54, our satisfaction surveys are reported. There's slightly fewer done in August for understandable reasons, but still 4,900 surveys done with a 93% satisfaction rate from our patients and families. And actually, given that the rest of the report focuses on finance, and the danger of reporting was in my position for the 6th time.
Okay.
Some colleagues.
Thank you. So can I ask any comments or questions for? So we can acknowledge all the hard work that's going on, particularly say thank you for the improvement work that's underway currently. I'll take assurance on that. Thank you. So Steve, shall we move to the update then from the Quality and Safety Committee, please?
Sure, yeah. And so the report in the papers goes back to July. There was another meeting yesterday that's not reflected yet, but I'll touch on what was discussed. I'll skim over the July points really, because things have moved on since then, and many of them have been discussed already this morning. We had a report on clinically optimised patients. We could see some progress being made with the implementation of the discharge service, but we still, as we've heard this morning, we still have lots of challenges there. We received the findings of a joint inspection of learning disability services in one of our areas. It's actually in the Cwmtab Health Board area, which we cover from Swansea Bay. That was a joint inspection by the Care Inspectorate of Wales and the Health Inspectorate of Wales. So, because this team is a joint team between us and the local authority, and we noted that there were some improvements that were improvement actions that were required. They came back again yesterday, and much of the work has been done. So we made some very good progress since July in that area. Back in July, we also had an assuring report on the Wales Fertility Institute, which the board will remember had sustainability challenges over the last year or so, but is now in much better shape and has been de-escalated by the Commission and the JCC, not to zero, but well below the threshold of concern. So that is going in the right direction. We received a very moving and actually miraculous burns patient story from our burns service, somebody who was terribly badly burned, and the journey that they made to recovery, and all sorts of physical treatment, but also mental health treatment that was required. So that was all a positive end to that meeting in July. Yesterday's meeting, let's see, I should just pick up some highlights. The health and safety report, you're aware that the Quality and Safety Committee now covers health and safety. That separate committee no longer exists. We have a periodic report on health and safety. The main issue arising from that was concern about the disrepair of some of our estates, which all will be familiar with. But when I asked the head of health and safety what kept him awake at night, it was mainly some of those issues of this repair. We received an update, and the board has already heard about the CDIF and challenges. It is a matter of huge concern, because I mean, it's a matter of huge concern anyway, but it's an area in which we're under targeted intervention, and it's, as we've heard from Devon and Julia this morning, we're not yet going in the right direction. We approved the first ever annual quality report. This is now an annual requirement, and that will be being translated and being finalised over the next weeks. But we approved the English draft yesterday. A great presentation from our Joint Acting Medical Director Raj on the maternity gold command. I mean, we've rehearsed a lot this morning already. The progress that's been made within maternity. A gold command was set out by Raj to cover the improvements needed in maternity and neonatal. We got a very reassuring update from him. Also reassuring was progress that had been made in the Children's Community Nursing Service, which board will recall was under a lot of pressure, huge challenges a year or so ago. They periodically come back and report on the progress to our committee, and I can say that it's looking much better and a much happier situation than it used to be. Two quality priorities which are moving from being quality priorities to mainstream. One is suicide prevention within our own staff, and sufficient work has been done on that now that it can be embedded in what we're trying to avoid calling business as usual, because it's still a priority, but it's now part of mainstream business. And another one which is not quite there is the end of life care. A lot of progress has been made, but we've asked for that to come back to the committee again in a quarter or so's time to give us another progress report, because we think it's not quite ready to be dropped as a quality priority. So that was all yesterday, and I think that's probably enough from me. So I'm happy to take questions.
Steve, obviously having an awful lot to run there. Anyone wants to ask Steve any points or any questions? You can receive that, Steve, with thanks really to you and the committee members for everything. We're now going to move into a sort of health protection and public health matter that I mentioned earlier. And Jennifer, I'm going to hand over to you on Mpox.
Thank you. So Mpox, as you heard at the start, is there are two known clades, and clade 2 was the one that was responsible for a global outbreak back in 2022. It's usually fairly mild condition, and therefore not usually one of great concern, but it's clade 1 that is now causing the concern that was referenced earlier. Most of the cases have predominantly been within Central and East Africa, and it has the geographical expansion of the number of cases that have happened into 2024 and those increasing numbers that has led to it being the WHO declaring it as a public health emergency of international concern, and the UK Health Security Agency therefore also labelling it a high consequence infectious disease. That therefore means that we're moving into an arena where we are looking to do some preparedness work. And that has also been as a result of the fact that there have been additional cases that have now emerged outside of the mainly affected areas. So there have been single cases in Sweden and Thailand, and as of yesterday, there was one reported in India. So they're all travel associated, and at the moment, just to reaffirm what was said earlier, the risk in the UK is still deemed as extremely low, but because of the the possibility of us receiving a case in similar circumstances to those that have been seen in those other countries, there's an expectation of us actually moving into that preparation planning for a response. At a national level, the Welsh Government have, sort of in line with the principles of communicable disease outbreak control plan for Wales, have established a policy oversight arrangement, and they've set up a health policy oversight cell as well to support the coordination of an all Wales planning and policy environment to enable us to move forward. Public Health Wales are taking the lead role in terms, as you would expect, as a national agency, taking the lead role of that or Wales-wide national coordination of activities. They've also, up until fairly recently, the testing for knowing which clade of Mpox was limited to laboratory capability in England, but Public Health Wales have now established one in Wales. That's important because it means it gives us greater speed to identify, which is important when we come to the update on our and how that informs our local planning. There's also been a desktop exercise to test our preparedness arrangements, because clearly we can have plans, but we need to test how good they would be in reality. So that was held on the 5th of September, and that is helping to inform further local and regional arrangements. So I'm going to hand over to Angela, because we've set up an internal arrangement. It is a group coming together that is very much on that, high consequence infectious diseases, of which Mpox is currently one, but it goes beyond that in terms of it's ensuring and shoring up our preparedness for any eventuality in line with that. So, Angela, would you like to pick up?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So, as you said, the work we're doing here in Swansea Bay is to prepare us for all high consequence infectious diseases, but mirroring our work now on the Mpox scenario. So it's really helpful because we're getting the guidance nationally, and it helps us then to inform our work locally. So in terms of the ask to health boards, which is quite defined, set by Welsh Government, is quite clear. So first of all, we are asked to establish an internal oversight mechanism. We are asked to ensure briefing, comms, awareness channels are in place, which focus on higher risk groups, contact points, particularly through paediatrics, maternity, integrated sexual health, and primary care, 111, and emergency departments. We are asked to review our contingency planning, our policies, our pathways, and our operational guidance, and undertake an assessment of available functional capacity, particularly around the negative pressure beds, the isolation facilities, the decontamination facilities, and the workforce availability around that. We've also been asked to assess a number of the training to our staff around PPE and the availability and our mechanisms of procuring PPE. And also looking at how many trained staff would be available to cover if we would have our first case of Mpox in Swansea Bay. And then we're also being asked to participate in local and national exercises. So for that matter, we then have now stood up our HCID task and finish groups, which was co-chaired by myself and Jennifer. And the first was held last week with sort of a briefing and an outline given to service groups and support services, what the Welsh Government ask is. The second task and finish group will then receive an update of what service groups have been working towards, particularly around the action cards, which have now been issued nationally. And then the third group, and hopefully then the last group, will be to test our preparedness in and the action cards with a case-based exercise, which we will undertake to provide that assurance.
Thank you very much for that really helpful update, I think, because it does actually bring to the board's attention our role and responsibility around health protection. And whilst this is mpox, it's applicable across, you know, sort of high consequence infections, as you said. So hopefully that gives the board assurance that the latest issue we are on top of and are preparing appropriately. Yeah, Jean.
May I just ask on the procurement perspective? I know there was a national protocol that everyone observed during COVID. Since COVID or post-COVID, has that been stood down and are we back to local procurement process?
It might be both of us coming in on this. There'll be different aspects of the procurement process in place, but
Sorry, I meant it specifically to PPE.
PPE, okay, that's fine. Because the vaccines would be the other element to it. So in terms of PPE, that is actually now being re-looked at in terms of where we can get the required PPE in the trays. Because at one stage there was an issue around the nature of whether all of the elements that would be required were actually able to be procured within Wales because there was limited supplies, but that's being looked at a national level, and we're working with them to establish what our existing supply chain is as well. So it's very much that national to regional coordination, so that the structures that have been set up have very much been about learning from COVID, about how do we shore up these lines very quickly should we need to.
Thank you very much.
Just to make, thank you, Jen. Just to make the point, this is UK national as well.
Yes.
So given that the expectation is low of a case, there's been one in Sweden. Initially, any single case, single figures, it's likely to be a high consequence infectious disease in central London, whereas where in the UK is where the patient requiring inpatient admission would first be taken. And then, you know, we get in, it's in a similar pathway to where we were with COVID. In some sense, a larger number of cases would mean there's a greater reliance on regional and local infrastructure to manage inpatients. So we're very much plugged into, it's not just Wales, it's UK national as well.
So it's primarily being led by UK government, as you'd expect, but all 4 nations are coming together on it.
Our final item before we break, and Tom's not with us, is the report from the last Workforce and OD Committee, which we can accept unless any member wants to raise anything with us in the report specifically.
Can I just raise the neonatal recruitment and retention? I'm particularly concerned because when we went out to neonatal, which was probably about a year ago for a visit, I was concerned that whilst we'd done really well in terms of recruiting for the maternity service, that there was still an absence of sort of qualified staff on nursing in particular in terms of neonates. So I just wanted some, because I wasn't on the committee at this point, but I wanted some assurance that how are we doing on that recruitment and have we got plans?
Thanks, Rita. So there has been an active recruitment programme and a strategic workforce plan in place for that part of the workforce because they're a very highly sought after, very specialist part of the workforce. We've got 10 whole-time equivalent band 5 starting in October, and we've got streamlining plans to bring a further 2 in line in March. We've filled 2 whole-time equivalents from our internationally educated nurse recruitment, and again we've got a further plan to continue to recruit internationally to supplement our local recruitment because there's such a skilled part of our workforce. So when all that recruitment is complete in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll be over-established, quite significantly over-established. So that's part of our strategic workforce plan that we've done around that. sector, and that's to take account of high levels of maternity leave. We have much higher levels of maternity leave in that part of our workforce that are very young part of the workforce, and also the increased training requirements in terms of that speciality. So in addition to that, we've also developed a programme to grow our own, to progress those band 5s to band 6s. So they're going to undertake training in HDU and ITU for neonates. So hope that assures that plans are leading to an improved position, and there's a sustainability built into it as well, Lena.
What to make a point there?
Yes, it was on the digital strategy. I guess just to say further to the endorsement that was made at the Workforce and Digital Committee, further discussions have taken place around the investment that will be in the long term and the benefits realisation, and there can be further work on that through there will be a new digital committee that I think we'll discuss further on the agenda today. So just to clear up on it.
And the new committee will take a look at that strategy as one of the first things it does. Thank you. Okay, so we'll break there and we'll reconvene on time at 12. Thank you. Yeah, let's move to let's start.
Are you coming in about how are you? That's what
And we turn now to our governance part of the agenda, part 5, and we'll open with issues from the audit committee. Julia, may I turn to you?
Take them for this read. The minutes that you have in front of you supersede the meeting of the audit committee, which followed a board meeting where we endorsed, agreed the health audit accounts and received the internal audit's opinion for assurance. Following on from our meeting last week, I would like to just alert the board of one limited assurance report that we had in relation to clinical coding, and also 2 reports from audit bills in relation to cost savings and operational governance arrangement, both of which point to weaknesses in our systems that we need to address. We took the recommendations for both reports, and they are now being referred to various different committees as part of our governance arrangements. I would also like to alert the board that the audit committee will be keeping a very close eye and scrutinising audit recommendations, the discharge of those audit recommendations, which they've been creeping up as we speak. And we will also be scrutinising responses. So if there are delays, we want to know exactly why those delays have happened. We will not take assurance from blank bits and pieces of paper. So please fill in those responses so that we can see where we're at each stage of the audit process. That's what I wanted to say, Claire.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sure these points will be well. Any comments? Darren?
Just briefly, because the audit report is fundamentally important to financial plan on savings delivery, we will incorporate, because we have responded in full with management response, recovery sustainability writ large through that, and we make sure that we pick up various actions related to that through that new way of working we described earlier in the session.
In respect of the audit-based operational governance report, I would just say, ask Raj if you can weave into the terms of reference for Go Command the relevant sections of that as they relate to maternity and neonatal services. So we pick that up and as one. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we move then on to any issues from the mental health legislation.
The only thing I wanted to add to the minutes is that court protection issues have increased in number and complexity. And one of the difficulties has been the collation of information in order to submit it to the court on time. There are financial penalties and there can be reputational problems if these things aren't done in time. Actually, bringing together the information that's needed requires input from clinicians. The problem that has faced clinicians is finding the time to be able to do those reports. But what has happened in the past, and I know from my previous job, is that the lawyers get some information from the clinicians and then write out the reports. So what goes into court is a much more legalistic rather than a medical solution to the problem or medical comments on the problem. There will be some more coordinated effort, but it is a problem for the service groups, and it is a very important thing that they have to deal with. And I think it isn't recognised well enough that if you don't put in a reasonably argued case for the position that the health board is taking in respect of a particular patient, then there may be an adverse outcome in respect of the decision. So it's kind of to make sure that we are keeping an oversight of that. A report on what cases are running will be brought back to the committee on a 6-monthly basis, so we can just see, because they do take a long time.
So you'll have that tracker. You have that tracking mechanism. Thank you, Anne-Louise. It's a really integrated point. Hazel, did you want to come back to that?
Just to add to that, I think it's really important that we get that board oversight on this work, because you outlined it well there. Really. Just to add in terms of understanding, we have appointed a new court protection lead post. It's due to start in late December. And we've established a steering group of reps from all the service groups, including nurse director level, and each of those service groups is going to nominate a senior lead for the court protection process who work with that corporate lead to try and get some more traction around the issues that Anne-Louise highlighted. So there is work underway to try and mitigate, but there is a significant demand.
So it'll be interesting to see in 6 months' time how that's bedding in.
So we'll turn now to the 2 items that we have on the agenda this afternoon around maternity and neonatal services. And as indicated this morning, we're taking them under this section because they are outside normal management arrangements. And Raj, I'm going to turn to you first, please, if you can update us on the work of Command that we check.
Thank you, Chair, and afternoon all. So I'll take the report as read and noted. Just to give a brief, the purpose of the report is to set out the goal command arrangements established for scrutiny and assurance of improvement within maternity and neonatal services and the progress to date. So in December 2023, the Health Board's maternity and neonatal services were placed by Welsh Government into enhanced monitoring. The escalation status followed an unannounced visit by Health Inspectorate Wales in September 2023, during which areas of immediate action were identified. The goal command structure has been established, led by the acting medical director as the senior responsible officer, to seek assurance that action has been taken. The main area of focus for the group are enhanced monitoring, inspection action plans, national reports, open incidents, and horizon scanning. There's only one action outstanding relevant in relation to the enhanced monitoring, and this is in relation to the Birmingham symptom-specific obstetric triage system, or BSOTS in short. A go-live date is anticipated in October 2024, for which the service group has set up a task and finish group. There are 3 HIW inspection reports for which recommendations are being addressed. Those for the 2019 report have now been closed. There are 2 improvement plans for the 2023 visit, one to address the 41 immediate action, of which 39 have been completed, and a general improvement plan for which 109 of the 118 are implemented. For the 2024 visit, which happened in April, 5 of the 6 immediate actions have been completed, and 11 of the 37 of the general improvement plan too. It is expected that all the HIW action plans will be completed by December 2024 deadline, with the exception of the breastfeeding initiative training, and staff have been rostered to complete it, but this will stretch into January 2025. In addition, there is one action to be delivered in April 2025 to recruit a woman experienced midwife for perinatal services, and funding has been secured for this post. Now, one of the significant development that has actually happened is actually being the reopening of the freestanding midwifery-led unit, and that did actually open on the 16th of September, and we heard the patient's story from Kathy Greaves this morning. Now, the fact is that one of the biggest concerns is the fact that we have got the HIW action plans, and the concern is the fact that are they actually being implemented and how assured we are. And arrangements have been made with the NHS Wales delivery unit for a visit in September, which will verify the evidence collected to support the closure of the completed HIW actions. The actions in relation to the health education improvement Wales reviews, as well as in response to the national reports, are also progressing well. Now, you'll notice from the report that there are a number of open incidents within maternity and neonatal services, and a review is taking place in September 2024 to identify which can be addressed quickly. So an incident sprint is actually happening as we speak. Matrons are ensuring that there are none which could cause immediate harm. With the exception of May 2024, on an average, the service is closing 85% of the incidents within the required time frame. And as part of the Goal Command's role, it does look into any potential reviews or reports relating to maternity and neonatal services, not just within Wales, within the whole of the UK. And if there is any relevance, that will actually be brought to the Goal Command too. So the report has been tabled for assurance purposes, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. And we know that underneath that very concise report is an enormous amount of work going on by the members of Goal Command. So I thank you for that. So can I just ask any points of clarification or questions for Matt?
Thank you for that. I found it to be a really clear report, and the progress is excellent. Just a bit of lack of knowledge, really. But the open incidents, could you just say a little bit about those? I don't know what they cover or what time.
I mean, I should say the fact is the open incidents are actually the patient safety incidents which should actually be reported. But what we also have to remember in maternity, there's actually quite a lot of natural triggers that actually do happen. So if the baby is actually being born who's actually low birth weight, it'll actually trigger off. If there are women who basically had a tear which was not anticipated, it'll actually trigger off. Quite a lot of them are low to moderate incidents. There is also a big number, which is it's not a big number. That's actually the higher case incidents too. The ones that could be closed, we will actually close. We'll actually learn from those incidents. There are the ones which will actually go into the breach of duty, the qualifying liability, which will take its own time. But I would reassure the fact that there are actively looking through the process and will make sure that the numbers are actually brought down. All I also would add is we do have about 120 incidents reported every month. Now, reporting of incidents doesn't mean that something bad is going wrong. It actually demonstrates the psychological safety within the unit. So I would actually take confidence in the fact that they're part of the reporting side too.
Because they feel confident to be able to report.
Absolutely.
That's without.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing, say, from a psychological safety perspective and for compliance with the duty of conduct. So that's a really good thing to do. So Steve, we know that quality and safety, you keep a watching brief on open incidents across the piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how it works through. Jean.
I'm just smiling because
Oh,
we put it
sorry, I've got to say, wait. Anne-Louise first or Jean?
It doesn't matter, Jean is well to go first.
One of the things I noted in the report was horizon scanning.
Yep.
And it says as part of the Gold Command
Yep.
responsibilities. What happens when Gold Command stands there?
That's a good question. And I should say the fact is that should be part of normal business for any department and any part of the organization. So my issue is the fact that if there is another report on maternity, or let's say, for example, even if it's for mental health in any part of the country, which is actually of significance, we should be doing a gap analysis. It should be going through their quality and safety process within their department, and then be reported as part of the service group, quality and safety to the quality and safety group and the committee. That is the expected norm. But as part of the Gold Command, we thought we'll actually pick that up too.
What should happen, Jean, is that the report will come in through governance and then it will be allocated out accordingly and then overseen accordingly. But Raj wanted to include this, didn't you, because of the number of reports that are out there currently on maternity services and because it's featuring national.
Thanks. One of the things that is referred to in the report on page 9, but it's referred to, I think, as BSOTS, which is, I think, the Birmingham Symptom Specific Triage System, which hasn't yet been implemented. I think my understanding is that it is soon to be implemented, and that I hope will make a considerable difference. But what I would like to know is how that will be managed and followed up so that we actually know that the implementation has an impact on the management of these, the women who come in. Because leaving people in the waiting room has always been a problem.
No, and I should say the fact that the BSOTs could not be implemented in time was because of the environmental arrangements. So when you actually have women in red, amber or green, you need to make sure you should be able to actually triage, and if there is any deterioration, it can actually be picked up. So the arrangements actually have been made with regards to it. On speaking with the service group and with colleagues actually on the floor, they are actually making sure that if there is any deviation from that particular compliance, that will actually be reviewed just like any other incident which will actually happen. So in one way, this is actually, the progress that's made is actually the right thing to do.
Thanks.
It's in consequence to Jean's question, Raj. How long do you envisage? Oh, sorry, let's put it another way. What will enable the Gold Command to stand down? What will be the criteria that we make that judgment?
So I think the fact that this is a long-standing process. So I should say, from first and foremost, we do have the Health Inspectorate Wales report that's actually going through. I'm quite keen that I'm not just looking for the Health Inspectorate Wales to come back for another review. We are making sure that we are actually on the front foot. So we are working closely with the Assistant Head for Risk and Assurance to make sure that we are actually giving the report. I should say the fact is closing this down soon is not what I'm looking for. That this is going to be quite a long-standing process. We also have to recognize that I'm actually an independent review going on as a meantime. I'm keeping the independent review different from this particular process because it is an independent review. But this is what should be actually happening with the health board perspective. So the HIW actions has to be closed down. But I think what is going to be important is actually the subsequent HIW reports and where actually we are with it. And once we have the assurance from that particular perspective, And once we are also making sure from an enhanced monitoring perspective that we have brought down to routine monitoring is what will actually give you the assurance to hand this back down to the service group. But at the moment, it's actually that we will actually keep carrying it on, because we don't want to have any action point that's actually been left behind. But a lot of investment has been made by the service group, especially with regards to the establishment. I should say, looking at what the team down there, I've got a lot of confidence, but I think it's just making sure there's an exec oversight for the time being until we are absolutely assured that we are actually on top of things. Thank you.
Nuria.
Guys, thank you very much. I really do welcome the establishment of the Gold Command, and I think it goes back to this horizon point around our escalation process and not getting to the stage where we are now. So I think for me is that link with our quality framework and what the next steps are, and that's something that I will be picking up on in the audit committee. The next stage too is about that assurance that we give to our community in terms of rebuilding the trust and confidence in the service. So I would like to hear more about what we're doing in that respect.
So if I can answer that question then. I think Raj has partly touched upon an aspect of it already in terms of getting the balance right between the reassurance that we currently provide without preempting the findings of the independent review, because it's really important that we respect the independent review process. That said, there are a number of ways in which we can provide the reassurance, and I'll touch upon some aspects of our work and some aspects of the independent review as well. So there's the regular reports and updates to the board. I think that gives us a solid foundation in terms of information that we can then share on a wider basis, and particularly obviously public board meetings. We've revamped the website, which I think is a really important step in the sense that we've now got a one-stop shop where there are links through to the independent review, but we've also got a whole host of other information there, from information for expectant mothers through to information about things like the birth centre, for instance, and the good news around that. We've also got then the independent review itself, publishing more regular updates on its website. We've got stakeholder updates in place as well that we are issuing. There's the stakeholder reference group, where that recently received an update on where we were in terms of maternity and neonatal services. I think it's worth paying due regard as well to the role of FICE. FICE got a very, very important role on an ongoing basis and in relation to the independent review itself. So there's their engagement that they're undertaking, the surveys, and a lot of things happening. And that leads on to really conversations around the independent review itself, which we'll come on to in terms of the co-production of the engagement plan and different groups that have been established. So it's a wide range of different efforts. But as I said, I think it's really important to get the balance right between reassurance now based on the things that Raj has been talking about without preempting the review.
We'll be building that plan obviously as progressed.
A quick question, Raj, just a point of accuracy. On page 6, there's a paragraph that starts at the deadline for completing all the HIW actions to December 24. So on track with the exception of the breastfeeding initiative. But the following paragraph makes reference to something that's going to deliver in April 25.
Yeah.
Was the one in April 25 not part of HIW?
No, the April 25 is actually part of that. So if you actually look at the right at the top of the table, it's actually the December 2024 action was actually in relation to so the April 2025. The reason is the fact that the model is actually evolving. So I felt it was actually not fair to basically run fast with it. Let's actually let the model settle down, and then we'll actually.
The point is in the prior paragraph. Yeah. The actions that we said would be completed by the end of December 2024. They're all done apart from one.
Yeah.
And the next one is just making clear that there's one additional for April 25.
Yeah.
We will continue to keep a report from Gold Command on our agenda whilst it's running, given the critical importance of the issue. So we can both acknowledge and support the fact that we have Gold Command structure. And Steve, speaking to your point, of course, when we have the standard operating procedure, that will help in terms of any escalation and de-escalation process. So we can take assurance, Raj. And again, we thank you and the team for all the work that's going into this. And we heard earlier, I think, around HIW. And Julia, do you want to say anything further around that?
Really closely linking with the work which is happening in Gold Command. I know there's been some interactions with HIW in regards to improving the training environment for our existing trainees, and raising our and ensuring professional standards are met within that environment as well. And we are working very closely and continuously to improve that, to make it a high quality training environment for medical education.
So we'll minute that as well. And of course, there is a significant amount of work underway on closing the open incidents, Raj, and we'll come back to us on that, and you can take assurance from that, and the fact that we are horizon scanning, and also that we've asked you to look at the audit report on operational governance as it affects this work. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that turns to the second item under maternity and neonatal services that we touched on, where we are with independent review. So Hazel, could you take us through your update report, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. So members will be aware that Denise Traffler is in place as the interim chair of the oversight panel. We've asked her to, if she would stay on until the 31st of December and then review those arrangements in November. So we're asking board to formally agree that extension for Denise. In terms of the project plan, then this has been identified and set out over 3 phases. June to November 24 will be setting up safe and controlled field work. There's a number of factors involved in that relating to GDPR compliant, safe communication methods, setting up a clinical group triage, and also touching on a point that came up in the previous report about knowing the safety of our current services. So we are expecting a report looking at our governance and how safe are we now. June to March, then there's fieldwork. This will include the case studies, the clinical reviews themselves, and also self-referrals, and then reporting in March to May 25. I think it's important to set out now expectations. While those timelines are set out now, we don't know how many service users will come forward using a self-referral system. So we may need to extend those timescales, but obviously we're asking the board to accept an update at each meeting, so we can pick that up at each meeting then in terms of when we know how many self-referrals have come forward. Quite significant updates and developments then, set up a family and community voices steering group. Purpose and function of this is a planning group to develop a variety of means of engagement, will result in direct contact with as many families as possible. And they are hoping that along with the engagement each chair in that meeting will be 2 stakeholders be nominated from families with lived experiences, and we're using Fly Speaks and the Maternity Voices Partnership to help identify those people. Including those families is really going well. I've taken out surveys of the maternity and neonatal services. They're also supporting individual discussions with families as well. There's a website that's been set up that people can keep updated on in terms of the developments. Posters have been sent out to GP surgeries, religious group, play groups to notify of the review that's going on as well. And also there's been engagement with AFMA and the maternity voices as well as other key stakeholders. The clinical review, that's up and running now. They started to review the cases and letters are going out to families. There is a 28-day period to opt out of the review, and to date nobody has opted out. Psychological and emotional support is really important. We have that in place. There is an email address on the website that families can contact if they need that support, and we are looking to strengthen those arrangements as well. As I've said, self-referral is set up and that's going ahead. And 2 independent midwives has been set up to support that service separate of the health board. Touching on the governance, resources is a key issue for us, which we'll be monitoring as a health board through our performance and finance committee, and a sum of 700,000 has been set aside for 24-25. That will cover fees for oversight panel members, clinical reviews and being undertaken, engagement, governance and leadership, wellbeing and psychological support for families, as well as a number of other things. And to date, the total spend is 269,794. And as I've said, the Performance and Finance Committee will keep a watch over that. There's also a governance pack that's been developed that's attached as Appendix 1 as well. I won't go through that in detail, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, so that's a really comprehensive report, bringing together all the different elements of the review. Any comments, questions, points of clarification from these? Well, that was really well set out. So thank you. So are we able to approve Denise Chafer's extension? The rationale really being that the review is up and running now. We are moving forward across the different strands and actually calling a halt now for an advertisement and recruitment process will take us back in time. And Denise is happy to continue on that basis and is providing the leadership to the team to keep that review moving forward. So that's the rationale. We intend to approve and then to look at the timelines and the receipt of the overall draft report, acknowledging that if we do have more referrals coming through than we were anticipating or that the team is anticipating, that may change in final terms, but we will be looking at